And you'll know why.
How we doing? Good to see you. It's been a while. Well, since the last time the other RLC. Yeah, I think right now, in general, we just said the rest, there's World Trade Park, so that's what we got. As far as I know, it's obviously something more about, Debbie heard
but they probably have to do the same thing for paper right-of-ways.
That's correct.
Yeah.
There's 3 additional ones. And as a matter of fact, it's funny that you ask, because at the 3 p.m. session, they said that to hold a public meeting for those to do 3 parcels. Yeah.
That came up, late.
Right.
How's everything going?
Good. Good.
Yeah. That's good.
It's all good. How about you?
This thing, it's not going back to 2006. It's the appropriate time. We haven't staffed up.
Good to see you. It's been a while. How you doing?
Yeah, good to see you.
Yeah. Hanging in there?
Yeah. Trying to do as much as you can.
I was going to say.
She was busy.
I don't know if
How are you?
Good, how's it going?
Good to see you.
How are you?
Debbie Charlie Baberman,
Hi,
nice to see you.
yeah, good to see you.
Community development part.
See you. Yeah.
Nothing's changed in the CUP, right?
Not on our end, it's not.
I think you got it covered.
Do you need some more pages? I need more papers. Less papers is better. Yes, ma'am. Amen.
Yeah, you definitely. I honestly think I was here yours too. The others. There you go. Rolls. Yeah.
We were under the impression. Heard things.
So Erickson hasn't come forward. It's like 17.
Don't feel what's the word? Filibuster.
Yeah, well, it takes up that whole peninsula. In between Thunder Oak Creek, to branches out of here. The bridge would actually have to be built at some point in the future. So.
Hey, how's it going? Good to see you. Joanne. Yes. They are. When I'm getting ready to open the presentations, Todd's labeled his 2 TCSD. One is mosaic and one is pond
I'm right here.
view.
No, Pond View was actually, you can actually put that into the old file just to get it out of your view, because that was like 3 p.m. I just had a presentation.
Okay, so I need to open up mosaic for you tonight.
Correct.
Okay, that's all I need to know. It's mosaic.
And the connection fee
Well,
ordinance is first.
yeah, I got that.
And then the golf
It's
course is
just they were 2 parcel things, and I wanted to make sure. Okay, that's all.
The road been extended a little bit. Just a little bit. Now the road's still good. Oak Ridge still
Top. Top.
but the corner of Broad Street is
This
just
woman over there in the middle, is she one of the Is she original cloud?
But I don't know. You want to ask Joe?
I was just curious to know.
We were directed to be up front.
Oh, you know what? Oh, it's the golf cart.
Are they supporting or not?
Yeah, they want.
Oh, they are?
I don't know. I don't know.
Yes, and then, yeah. He's tall. I think that's probably his.
Yeah, they do.
She lives in the sunset. I think they probably his first name. I think in Waukesha. I'm pretty sure. But she lives in the sunset. I don't think it's, she could be in the cloud. We're gonna find out.
We will find out.
But she says hello to me, but
Secret door, actually.
all of the presentations are separate tonight. They don't run like one after the other. They're all different PowerPoints tonight. But I think it's just falling out. Oh, I do this because I can't stand it hanging in my face. So it's, if I put a light braid, it just keeps it out of my face. Me too. I'm learning a lot. Debbie, what are you trying to do? The little star.
Okay.
Is that green
Just
star
wanted to
right
make
there?
sure.
Yep, you got it.
I don't want to hit this and.
Oh, no, we don't want to pull it. I think that like blacks it out, but I don't want to.
I know.
I don't want to gamble with that.
That's why I figured I was going to pass.
It's
Not that hard.
yeah.
Hey,
Joanne. Robin Gatsby is in the live t-shirt right there, right? She is on the one. Oh, there she is. Okay, and then who's the chick right up here? Is that the cloud? Yes. Okay, that's what I always like to know. Yes. And then yeah, they're the golf. They're supporting. Cameron. No, I'm at the drama. Yeah, yes. People talking, so introduce, and they're supportive of the golf cart. Okay. All right.
I see somebody's keeping me in line.
you said 10, so I figured they need to resupply.
No, it isn't. Okay, good. Good. Oh yeah?
She's a suspect on the disappearance, the occasional, the inventory reduction.
Oh. It's something about my. I like my chocolate simple.
Good evening. I'd like to welcome everybody this evening to the evening session of the Goochland County Board of Supervisors meeting for August 7th, 2018. The first item on our agenda this evening is the citizen comment period. And I'd like to remind everyone this citizen comment period is not a public hearing. During the citizen comment period, anyone who wishes to come forward to speak may come forward to the microphone to speak on any item of Goochland County business. But if you're here to speak about one of the public hearings this evening, we would ask that you wait until the public hearing, and there'll be an opportunity to come forward then so that we can consider your comments in the context of the public hearing. So right now, I'll go ahead and open up the citizen comment period for any item that's not on the agenda for this evening. Anyone like to come forward? Okay, seeing none, I'll go ahead and close the citizen comment period. The next item on the agenda is the public hearings for this evening. We have a fairly extensive schedule. There's a total of 9 public hearings scheduled for this evening. And for those that aren't familiar with the process will be generally as follows for each of our public hearings. Staff will present the application to the board. The applicant or their representative will then be given an opportunity to speak. We'll then open up a public hearing, and the citizens will be given an opportunity to come forward and speak. The applicant may or may not be given an opportunity to respond to some of the citizen comments, depending on the nature and extent of the comments made by citizens. And then the Board of Supervisors will discuss the application and perhaps ask any additional questions of staff and the applicant. And then at some point, the Board of Supervisors will render a decision. So that's generally the process for each of the public hearings for this evening. At this point, we'll go ahead and start our first public hearing. Actually, we'll not start the public hearing, but we'll hear the staff presentation of the application. Ms. Hunter?
Yes. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Joanne Hunter, Director of Community Development. As Mr. Peterson indicated, the first public hearing tonight is a proffer amendment that was submitted by Cameron General Contractors. Before I get into the specifics of the case, I do want to talk about process a little bit because I think there was some confusion between proffers and proffer amendment and POD and when things occur. So I just wanted to clear that up first. So proffers are voluntarily offered as part of rezoning cases by the applicant, and they are accepted and approved by the Board of Supervisors. They then become law for the property. They become legally binding to the property. Even if the property is sold, the proffers always remain with the property. So if somebody wants to change those proffers, the only way it can be done is if you go back through the public hearing process. You have to have appropriate advertisement, notice, a public hearing before the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors. So that's why we're here tonight, is because someone is asking for a proffer amendment. Once the proffer amendment is approved by the board, the applicant then does a site plan, or what we call in Goochland County a plan of development. The plan of development is when they do the engineering drawings. At that time, it's just an administrative review. It's reviewed only by staff. It doesn't go back to the Planning Commission. It doesn't go back to the board. There's no more further negotiations. There's no more proffers or conditions that can put on a POD. So proffers can only occur during the rezoning case, and then the POD is just an administrative review by staff. You either meet the standards or you don't. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear so that there wasn't any questions about whether you could have proffers on a POD or anything like that. So this is a proffer amendment. The request is to add a new use to a property. That use is Homes for the Aged. It's referenced to a property that's located at 12330 Patterson Avenue. This property is located near the county boundary in the southeastern portion of the county. The comprehensive plan designates the property commercial. The existing use and the proposed use is consistent with the comprehensive plan. The property is zone B1. Properties to the west are in purple. You can see they are zoned M1. That's the West Creek development. Across from the purple, you'll see a green kind of triangle piece of property. That's the Hope Church property, and then directly across from where this property is highlighted is the yellow, and that's the Rivergate subdivision. And you will see the proposed entrance for this property is located directly across from the Rivergate subdivision entrance.
Here's an aerial of the property. Important piece to note, this is the county's pump station located at the north eastern portion behind this property. So the county does have an access easement that runs through this property and would need to remain as the property's developed so that we can have continued access to the pump station. Another important point to make on this property is the rear portion of the property is covered in floodplain and has very limited development potential, and in fact they are impacting the floodplain in a very minor area, and there's a subsequent CUP case after this to be heard in reference to the floodplain. So just make things clear of what this request is. This request is to add a new use to the property. The original property was zoned B1 in 1988, and the proffers related to the case right now state that the only uses permitted on the property shall be A, office buildings, B, retail and service uses only if they're located within the office buildings, C, public utilities, including pump stations, and then the yellow is what they're proposing to add with this proffer amendment. That's D, homes for the age. Homes for the age is defined by our code is housing of 4 or more either aged or infirm residents. So it's sort of a very vague term. So this is the site plan from 1998. What you can see is that it was proposed for 2 office buildings. Each office building was about 90,000 square feet for a total square footage of office development of 180,000 square feet. So this is what could be built today without any changes to the proffer. This is a new conceptual plan. You do have a copy that's been handed out to you that's at the podium. We also have extras at the back of the table in the room. But before I go into details of the conceptual plan, I want to talk about the use a little bit. So what is proposed is a home for the age. What that is, they're proposing is an independent senior living facility, what we call congregate housing. So each unit would be an independent living unit. However, they do have shared services such as meals and activities and things like that. The project is not an assisted living facility. It does not provide any nursing or skilled care. These are independent, well elderly, people who are well living on their own. They're proposing 133 units. It's generally pretty much split down the middle between 1 and 2 bedroom units. They have a handful of studios and a handful of 3-bedroom units. It would be a 3-story building, and services to the residents in the facility include meals, housekeeping, a theater, pharmacy, gift shop, concierge service, valet parking, and a shuttle bus. And in fact, the applicant has described this as sort of a cruise ship on land, so all of their services could be met within the building. The applicant has indicated, based on the 130 units, they estimate the full occupancy to be about 150 to 170 residents, and they have found that in their projects in other areas of the country, the average age of the resident is about 80 years old. The applicant did make some changes to the application. Those proffers were also handed out. Those were in response to some conversations with the staff. The applicant had made some agreements and promises to the adjacent residential community of Rivergate. The county cannot enforce promises, but the county can enforce proffers. So some of these things that were talked about or shown on the conceptual plan, we asked the applicant to put in a written form in the proffer so that we can enforce it. That's the only thing we can enforce is proffers, and they need to have clear triggers. So those are some of the changes that were made between when you saw the board packet and this evening. So what some of the changes is that the applicant has proffered a building maximum height of 3 stories. They had already indicated that the senior congregate care would be 3 stories. Now anything that occurs on the Phase 2 property would also be 3 stories. The applicant has also provided a proffer dealing with an access easement for the East End Trail. The county has been working on the East End Trail project that will run from Patterson Avenue to Broad Street. One of the terminus points is here at the pump station, so they have provided through proffer an access easement, which is a big improvement to the application. The turn lanes, this is dealing with turn lanes in Patterson Avenue. The conceptual plan that they have been showing since the very beginning has always shown the turn lanes. This is now just putting it in a written form. So it says prior to a CO, an eastbound turn lane and a westbound taper lane will be provided. So if you're going towards Richmond, at the median break, there would be a left turn lane at the median to go into the development. If you're coming towards Goochland Courthouse, there would be a right-hand taper into the project. And then when phase 2 was developed and the traffic increases, there would be a full right turn lane. One other change I think that has caused the most concerns is the applicant has proffered a conceptual plan. This conceptual plan is half of it has always been shown. The western portion of the property was always shown from the very beginning, but they never showed a use for the eastern portion. As you're aware, earlier today you did do a referral to the Planning Commission for an ordinance amendment dealing with adult housing. As I gave you the definition of homes for the age, it's pretty vague, and we've always had to do zoning interpretation letters. So staff has asked the board to consider looking at adult housing as a whole and how we want to address it. So this term, homes for the age, as part of that ordinance amendment, is going to be going away because it really is just too vague and doesn't really mean anything. We don't want that to impact this project. We support this project. We think it's a good project. So in order for them to be able to develop, if that term homes for the age goes away, they have to have a proffered conceptual plan that would be considered a significant government act if it was accepted. And even if that term went away, because they've proffered a conceptual plan, they would still be able to do homes for the age. So that was the reason for the change at the last minute, and that was requested by staff. So let me show you now the conceptual plan. So as I was saying, the eastern portion of it has always been shown since the beginning of the process. This will be where the cruise ship or congregate housing would be located. And now they're showing a potential for phase 2. Based on the proffers, if this is approved as submitted tonight, this phase 2 could occur either as an office development or a homes for the age. I know the importance to the neighbors of how the front of the property is treated. So I tried to show you here in color how it would be treated. So the front here is the front property line runs along here. You can see the left turn lane. I'm sorry, Mr. Alvarez, if I'm burning the back of your head. The left turn lane, and then here you'll see the right taper, which would go to a full right turn lane. So this green area shows a 50-foot vegetative buffer. This is part of the proffers. It was part of the 1988 proffers, and it's continued to be part of the proffers. In that area between the right-of-way and that green line, that first 50 feet, they have agreed to keep any trees that are over 5 inches in caliper and anything else that they can keep as part of a vegetative buffer. The red line is showing you the 75-foot parking lot setback. So no parking could occur in front of that. You can see for both phase 1 and phase 2, that is met. The blue line shows you their 150-foot building setback. So no buildings could be closer than 150 feet to Patterson Avenue. And you can see that's shown with phase 1 and in phase 2. The other issue of contention with the zoning case is this is the one access point from the property. So both phase 1 and phase 2 would have one access point. The applicant, in response to concerns by the neighborhood, is proposing a right out only. Staff does have concerns with the right out only. our concerns are based on that it would eliminate the turning movement. It does not eliminate the turning movement. It simply moves eastbound traffic to the west, and it would now require all those people to do a U-turn at a much busier intersection. I'll show you that in the aerial photo in just a minute. There's no safety concerns at this issue. There's only been one accident at this intersection since 2013. And the new left and right turn lanes with storage and taper will improve those movements through that intersection, and we do not think it would be an issue. And also the right out only would also make the truck traffic movements for going to the county pump station much more difficult. VDOT has been, as part of privy to this conversation of what to do with this, VDOT has concurred with the recommendation for a full access entrance at the existing crossover based on the assisted living and pump station only. So they think that the traffic volume with these two uses, there's no need to have a restriction. However, they did indicate as phase 2 is developed and the traffic increases, there may be a need at that time to look at closing that and not allowing that crossover action. So I did want to show you, this would be the entrance. You can see across from Rivergate, with this only being a right out only, the people would travel just about a half mile down the road to West Creek Parkway and Hope Church. This is an intersection that we know is heavily traveled right now. We'll actually be getting a traffic light here, hopefully sometime soon. People would need to do a U-turn there and come back, travel back another half mile down to continue past the property. That would be with the way the conceptual plan is submitted, that is the only traffic movement that can occur, and if you want to leave the site, would be up and around at the West Creek intersection. There was a community meeting back in April of this year. About 25 people attended. There was really no significant opposition, but there were a number of questions and concerns raised, and I think the residents and the applicant have worked on those since those meetings. The Planning Commission did recommend approval of this request with a 5-0 vote. They did note extreme concern with the site access and encouraged the applicant to work with staff and VDOT to ensure safe access to and from the site. During that public hearing, one person spoke, citing concerns with any left-hand turns onto Patterson Avenue. So I'm going to review the proffers. So again, these are the proffers that were submitted in 1988. I've shown you the new language highlighted in yellow. So if it's underlined, that's new language. If it's struck through, that means it's being removed. Again, the primary reason was to add the homes for the aged use, but we did clean up some other proffers to make them more compatible with ordinances that occur now. So the first one is public utilities. They shall be used. One thing I did not mention is this property is located in the Tuckahoe Creek Service District. Use restrictions, again, I went over. Right now they can do office, retail and service in an office, and public utilities, and we'd be adding the use home for the age. Exterior materials, we've updated that based on the overlay district. This property is also subject to the River Road overlay district, so any use in this property would require a certificate of approval. So the materials have been updated based on what's permitted in the overlay district. The parking lot lighting is now a code requirement, so that was removed as a proffer. Again, because there's a certificate of approval required, that those are referenced in rooftop screening, trash receptacles. The setbacks are the ones that I went over with you earlier, the 50 for the vegetation, 75 parking, and 150 for a building permit. Utilities will be underground. Signage is tying to a certificate of approval. They'll submit a landscaping plan. The severance proffer that was eliminated at the request of the application of at the request of the attorney, our county attorney. And then 12 through 15 are the new proffers that were submitted since the board meeting. So these are the ones that I want to take some time to go over. So it is showing that they've submitted the conceptual plan, that the conceptual plan would be developed in 2 phases, phase 1 and phase 2. Phase 1 would be the congregate care. Phase 2 could either occur as either an office building or a homes for the aged. Building height, it's limiting the entire property, both phase 1 and phase 2, to 3 stories in height. The access easement, as I indicated, the applicant has improved the case by providing access easement for the construction of the trail for the Goochland East End Trail project. And then the turn lanes have always been shown on the project. This again is the turn lanes in Patterson Avenue, the left-hand turn lane into the project, and a right turn lane. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Board, we have questions for Ms. Hunter?
Mr. Chairman.
Yep.
Ms. Hunter, can you go back to proffer number 12?
Mm-hmm. Yes. The flag is a little bit in the way. We might want to move that over at our next break, but that's
the
the
flag?
first one up there is proffer number 12.
Yeah. That's different than the one we have at our desk. Is
The
that
one at the desk is the new one.
The one in your resolution no longer tracks the old proffers. It is written for
okay,
the,
so this is the correct
Yes, what was
proffer.
handed out.
so that one 12 conceptual plan.
What were you pointing to, just like this?
Well,
This sheet, that sheet. So this is correct. Okay.
it doesn't match this, though, right?
It doesn't match what's on the screen.
That doesn't match what was handed
We've
out.
been fast and furious making changes today, so,
But what we have here is what the developer
yes,
is currently proposing.
yes.
And what is
Apologize.
this?
So which one?
On
The language on the screen was originally how the developer was conveying the idea that's before you, which is that he's putting forth a conceptual plan for both phase 1 and phase 2. He doesn't intend to do them all at the same time, but to phase them. The language on the screen is a proffer, but it's legally mandating to the county, you can't make me build phase 2. Well, that's not the purpose of a proffer. So I got in touch, the attorney and I talked, and resulted in the language that's before you in 12,
Good.
in the book, that gets that very same idea across, but doesn't contain that mandatory language to the county, which is called a negative of proffer, and it's not appropriate.
Okay. Okay.
That should have been corrected. That was my fault.
Everybody,
No. So which is correct? What we're seeing on the screen or what we have in
what's
front
on
of
your,
us?
What's in front of you.
front
Okay.
you.
they're,
And they both,
Would
they both say that they're proffering a conceptual plan and it's developed in 2 phases.
Why don't
So-
I go ahead and do this? We don't have it otherwise a part of the record, other than only the board members up here have it. So perhaps we should read the corrected proffer 12 in.
there you go.
Be happy to let you do, or I
Can
will
do
do
it. You have
whichever.
it in front of you.
Proffer 12, conceptual plan. The property will be developed in 2 distinct phases, shown as phase 1 and phase 2 on the conceptual site plan submitted with the application and attached here too as Exhibit A, entitled, quotes, 12330 Patterson Avenue, close quotes, prepared by Bowman Consulting and dated August 2nd, 2018, the conceptual plan. Development of phase 1 of the property shall generally conform to the portion of the conceptual plan pertaining to phase 1, and development of phase 2 of the property shall generally conform to the portion of the conceptual plan pertaining to phase 2. So just so our audience and everyone knows the exact language.
Good, thank you. You okay?
No, Mr.
Well,
Chairman.
no, you got, okay.
Okay.
Mr. Alvarez,
No,
did
go
you?
ahead, go ahead. I'll have another one, but
Ms.
I'll
Laslett,
come
you
back.
want?
All right, so Ms. Hunter, where is the trail easement?
Here in the back. This is the utility easement.
So all the way back.
Yes. So it wouldn't, back here is floodplain anywhere. They can't develop that portions of the property anyway. And that's where
So does that come out? Does that go all the way down?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Okay. If you don't mind,
No,
one
go right
other
ahead.
question. The units are residential, are they rented out or are they sold?
This particular project is a rental fee, so you pay a month fee, and that covers your rental, your unit, your meals, your
Right.
activities, everything.
Right.
But this is
But
a
it is a
rental.
rental, so this is not owner occupied.
Yes.
Thank you.
The questions, John? Do you? Yeah.
Back to following up a little bit on Ms. Scott's question. I'm looking at the paper version here. That easement in the back, it's for an easement that allows a walking trail, right? It's not vehicular traffic.
Right. It's only for walking.
It says gravel connection to walking trail. So that goes to the west. Where's the plan for that trail to end to the west?
I actually have the full map. If you just give me a minute to get there. So this is the long-term plan. You can see here's Broad, here's Patterson. The county has plans to have a full walking trail that runs all the way through the whole eastern boundary of the county. The county has utility easements in that area that are maintained and cleared, and the county's now beginning to start the process to put access easements in there.
So the point at the bottom, is that the terminus we're talking about?
Yes, and you can see
It's
that
circled
down
there.
there.
It's right there. So
Mhm.
very bottom.
It's right there.
Okay.
Yes.
So, is that terminus going to have, is there a future plan to have parking in that area? How are people going to get to that point?
We anticipated when we developed this, because of our pump stations already down there with existing parking area and those kinds of things, that we were going to potentially co-locate that end plan at the pump station. And so, again, these are conceptuals. We've been working, this is a long-term master plan, but we always anticipated ending down near the pump station.
Where I'm going with this is, are we going to be asking that the easement that the applicant grant, in addition to getting to the pump station to service it in county vehicles, is that going to be the public's access to a parking area?
No, the parking area would be on the county-owned property.
And the access to it would not be via this easement?
This would just be for the trail.
No.
Via the front easement is what I'm talking about.
Well,
Oh,
I'm talking vehicular traffic.
Right.
I think you drive in through the access off of Patterson, park back where the pump station is, then do the walking trail with your dog or your, walk through the woods. Conceptually, this is very early on, but is that consistent?
you got
For the purpose of this, the applicant, the easement, the nature of the easement that we're going to get is going to address all the possibilities of the conceptual future for this walking trail.
Yeah, and the county already has the easement for access that's already existing that goes to the pump station. This access easement would be for the rear of the property for the recreational
And
amenity.
the scope of our easement is not limited to just vehicles that can service the pump station, right?
I believe the scope of the easement, I haven't reviewed it, but maybe. However, as we are developing that trail, we are coming up with now easement language for all the ones we want to use for recreational, and we would assume that that would be acquired at the time that we're developing this leg of that eastern trail.
Okay.
But, yeah, if I may, Mr.
Sure,
Chairman,
sure.
that's a good point.
That's a
that
really good point.
we don't want to limit ourselves to where now the easement is going to be going through two office buildings, and that there might be some limitations at some point if we want folks to park at the pumping station, which is very similar to the northern end of that trail also starts at a pumping station on Broad Street.
Right.
So we just want to make sure that, I think it'd be important to know if we're going to have rights for folks to drive through that entrance and to the pumping station to park their car, get their bicycle out, and go use the trail.
I don't presume that we have those rights at this time, but we are planning to develop those rights as we plan the trail. The trail's been the subject of planning for a while. Even in the year I've been here, certain legs of it have moved from concept to actual on the ground. And so I don't know that we're at the position to say today to this applicant, hey, and we need a recreational easement here, because we're not there yet to know exactly where it's going to go. But
It sounds like we're not ready to cut off that option.
Still want to cut the option.
Yeah, the way we originally interpreted the language that's being proposed is this would not preclude our access to the trail easement behind that runs on the rear edge of this property. Our planned access is at the pump station. I think to specifically address your concern is the easement that we have that we can access the pump station with for our purposes transferable to guests of the trail in the future?
Right.
Well, I mean, Ms.
Good question.
Tara, you correct me. Number 14, access easement. An easement shall be granted in favor of Goochland County permitting the construction and public use of a walking trail.
That's the back part.
That's the walking
That's the
trail,
back part walking trail.
not the road.
We're talking about the front part road, I think.
This access to construct and public use. There's also, well, separate access for the pump station. That's number 9. So this, I guess, number 14 doesn't specifically say that the access for the public use is through the walking trail. It doesn't say that that's how you access. This could be, I mean, the way I'm reading this, that the access for the public use of the walking trail, you could either walk it down the walking trail or you could drive into the pump station. Either way would be, but I'll defer to our county attorney for number 14 to let us know whether that gives you what we need. Because I think his point is, there's no point in constructing a trail that you can't get to use, and we understand the pump station's there. We'll need to have access to that to maintain it, and we'll need access to construct the walking trail. But does it give us what we feel is appropriate for access to use the trail? Is that, John, is that where you're going with that?
Yeah. I mean, we don't want to have an end of a trail in no way for, particularly when you look at this area, we need to have parking close by. And so where's that parking going to be? And if the terminus is the pump house and parking is around there, we need a way to get to it. And we ought to not cut off one way unless we know that we have plans for another way.
Mr. Chairman, if I can confirm with the county attorney, there is language in here right now that could be amended if the applicant were so inclined to proffer so. Right now it says an additional emergency access may be permitted to serve a pump station if required by the county. More along the lines, an additional access may be permitted to serve the pump station and walking trails would be probably address the concern that I think is being raised by the board if the applicant were so inclined.
Does that mean we'd have to construct a new?
And you're talking
New
about
access to
proffer 9, which is the vehicular access.
Right. But that, well, an additional emergency access may be permitted. See, that says if the fire chief or the sheriff or somebody deems it necessary to create another access, but that would require us to create another access as opposed to just utilizing existing accesses.
That's correct. I mean, and again, this is a proffer offered by the applicant, and I'm certain he crafted it in the idea that it was addressing some things that we needed. We're finding that it doesn't address vehicular access to the trail, and so I don't know if the applicant's interested in how he might change that, or
That's a question for the applicant.
yes, again, and a willingness as well as then how.
Okay.
Question,
Mhm.
a long question on the light that's coming at Hope Church. Do we know the configuration of that? Do we know, and I'm guessing, but I don't want to assume, that westbound traffic will get there will be a left turn arrow into Hope Church. That traffic signal will have a left turn arrow.
I'm not sure at this point how it's going to be designed.
Because that would be important if you differentiate job presenting to us the whole idea of the right turn. And I've seen some things where there's concern. My thought is I have concern about people crossing, aged elderly people crossing both lanes of Patterson.
Mm-hmm.
It's dicey when I do it sometimes at 5 in the afternoon. And I don't like the idea of a lot of ingress and egress out of that by folks. So if we're going to talk about right turn only, which I tend to like, we ought to be thinking about, is there a safe way to make a U-turn? And a left turn arrow there at Hope Church would seem to do the trick.
Mm-hmm. Staff is indicating we have not gotten any design drawings yet for that traffic light.
And as long as there's no plans to put a no U-turn sign there, I think that has to be set up with a left turn arrow. And I would think if they're going to have a left turn lane, people are going to Hope at specific hours. I would hope the left turn lane would facilitate U-turns during the rest of the time.
Seems reasonable.
Okay. Other questions for Ms. Hunter?
That's all. Thank you.
Other questions for Ms. Hunter?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to see, where is the light going to be again?
Sure.
At Hope Church?
Yeah, I know, but let me.
So this is the entrance to the proposed development. It lines up directly across from Rivergate subdivision. So if it's a right out only, you would exit the site, head down. It's about 2,200 feet, which is about a half of a mile. This is West Creek and Patterson. Hope Church is located here. I'm sorry, let me do it on this one.
Hey, Susan, she's doing it on the other
I'm
one.
going to do it behind you, Mrs.
Yeah,
Lascalette.
okay, good, because the flag's in my way.
Yeah. So this is the proposed access to the site. This is the existing access to the pump station.
Right.
It would be the access to the proposed Phase 1 and Phase 2 uses.
Right.
It's directly across from Rivergate. So if it was proposed as a right out only, people would travel about a half mile, about 2,200 feet down the road. This is West Creek Parkway and Patterson Avenue, Hope Church intersection. This is where the traffic light is going. So people would need to make a U-turn at the traffic light and then come back down Patterson Avenue to head east.
Gotcha. Thank you. Thank you.
Other questions for Ms. Hunter? No. Thank you very much. Okay, next we'll ask the applicant or their representative if they'd like to come forward and add or take away or change anything that's been said so far. And please just give us your name and address for the record.
Thank you, everyone. My name is Charles Baverman. I'm an attorney with Dinsmore & Scholl, located in Cincinnati, Ohio, 255 East 5th Street, zip code 45202. I represent Cameron General Contractors and Resort Lifestyle Communities, the applicant here before you this evening. With me this evening is Mr. Bob Lewis, Director of Development for Cameron General Contractors, as well as Kevin Deloy and Brett Hammonds, our project engineers with Bowman Consulting, based here in Richmond, Virginia. I'm going to at this time introduce, bring up to the podium Mr. Bob Lewis to discuss with you who Cameron is and what they do.
Great.
Good evening. My name is Bob Lewis, Director of Development for Cameron General Contractors, 7101 South 82nd Street, Lincoln, Nebraska, 68516. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, we appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight. I want to thank staff and the Rivergate community for working with us on this project, and we hope to be successful and build at this location, as staff indicated, a 130-unit independent living community. We will build, own, and operate this community. We currently own and operate 22 communities around the United States. 13 under construction and another 25 or so in the development. Again, I'm here to answer questions this evening that might come up, and with that, I'm going to turn the mic back over to Charlie.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
As Mr. Lewis said, our entire team is available for questions, and we can bring up the applicable member who can speak to the issue that any of you may wish to discuss. I do want to clarify and perhaps explain just a few items. With regard to the access easement, I do have a copy with me of the easement that was granted to the county, and as I read through it, it's an ingress-egress access easement to the county's property. As I read that, that would be, it wouldn't have to be a county employee. It could be anyone who would need to access the county's property, and from there they could access the trail. So in my view, the sufficient access exists to address your concern, to make sure that residents can access the trail. Obviously, if there's any disagreement, we have no conceptual objection to providing access to the trail from the county property. So anything we need to do in terms of amending that easement, we're certainly open to it. Just a few other items. The exit lane to the community that Ms. Hunter mentioned, that was crafted and shown on our conceptual plan following the neighborhood meeting we had with the all of the neighbors, but particularly the Rivergate homeowners and their board of their association. It was a specific request by the board due to what they view as safety concerns. We have made every effort to accommodate those homeowners and to craft a plan that they are comfortable with, and that's why we have shown the right turn exit lane. We understand that planning staff has a different perspective on the issue, and we respect planning staff as well. Frankly, we've not taken a position on this issue, and we defer to the board's judgment as to the appropriate means of egress from the site to the road. And we are prepared to proffer anything with respect to that issue as may be needed here this evening. As Ms. Hunter also mentioned, the development of Phase 2, we have no specific development plans at this time. What you see on the conceptual plan is the original 1998 building shown on that conceptual plan, as well as the general parking area shown on that plan. Because we have no specific development plans, but we need to show something, we felt that was the most appropriate plan to show. We fully expect and anticipate that in the event that either my client or subsequent buyer or user of Phase 2 prepares a specific plan, they will return to this forum and seek approval through these same processes for a specific development plan at that time. Lastly, I do want to just clarify that the use that we are seeking to add to the proffers here, Homes for the Aged, that is a use that is permitted within the B1 zoning district with, which this property is classified. This is not a use that is otherwise viewed as incompatible in the B1 district, but for reasons explained by Ms. Hunter, the 1998 proffers limited the uses to just one use, office purposes. We're seeking to broaden it to two, but that both of those uses are permitted B1 uses at this time. So with that, I have no further points. As I said, our team is here available for questions at your pleasure.
Okay. Do we have, board, we have questions for the applicant at this point? Okay. We reserve the right to call you back up. So thank you. Thank you. Okay. We've heard from staff and heard from the applicant. At this point, we'll go ahead and open up the public hearing. And again, for those that would like to come forward to speak, I'll just remind you to give us your name and address and try to keep your comments to 3 minutes. So with that, I will go ahead and open up the public hearing. Anyone who would like to come forward and speak in favor or opposed, just please approach the microphone. And
Mr. Chairman, I'm Roger Spence. My address is 13275 Kellington Lane in Rivergate. I am a former board member, and I'm now the chairman of the architectural committee for the neighborhood. And we decided to spare you a couple hours with bringing 60 residents here tonight, but I wanted to continue what I presented to the Planning Commission was our significant concerns with the exit from that new development. And let me expand on maybe some things you're not aware of. If you look at Cameron's website or whatever, they talk about building properties in well-traveled streets with walkways. That's not true of Patterson Avenue. 60% of the residents who will reside in these neighborhoods own and operate cars. They will also tell you that they only market to people who are 75 years and older. And the average age in their properties is 81 years old. Now, if you think about the other properties in the Richmond area, which are similar to this, like Cedar Field and Westminster, Canterbury, and others, they're typically in neighborhoods with 35-mile-an-hour speed limits. Most of them have stoplights. But we're now talking about a development of people who are anywhere from 75 to 85 or older who are driving a car. Patterson Avenue is no longer a casual, sleepy road to Goochland Courthouse. With 288 constructed, it's now a major highway with average speeds of excess of 60 miles an hour, particularly in the morning and the evening. And if you think about the median in Patterson Avenue along that stretch, and I wish I had the props I used with the Planning Commission, but it's only about 2 feet wider than the width of an average car, unlike what it is further west. So the only thing you can do with a median that narrow is build a left-hand turn lane. What happens, and those of us in Rivergate have experienced this as 288 opened. I live closer to Patterson, so when I want to go west, I turn right, I go down to CF Bank, and I do a U-turn and come back. I can't tell the traffic from Henrico which lane the cars are in, and we have traffic coming over the hill from Hope Church going 60 miles an hour. It is incredibly dangerous. The people who live closer to River Road now, they don't even bother with Patterson Avenue. They go out River Road, they turn right on Blair Road, and they go to stoplight to turn west. Because we are deathly afraid of that highway now and that very narrow median. The planning staff talks about, oh, it's a very safe intersection. There's only been one accident. Of course there's only been one accident. There's nothing been across the street from there. And the one accident was one of our residents who pulled out on the median, was unable to complete the turn, and got T-boned in the back. Now, I know that VDOT controls the roadways in Goochland, and I know that the planning staff is very much against this turn for whatever reason, and of course they have the contacts with VDOT. Frankly, I was shocked tonight to see the comment that VDOT has approved the continuation of the whatever. But I know that you as a Board of Supervisors should have and can have significant weight on VDOT with this intersection. And as I explained to the Planning Commission, what happens or what will happen with an 82-year-old pulling out? He must or she must cross 2 lanes of traffic going 55 to 60 miles an hour. They must cross a median, which is only the width of a car, and they must continue and turn left into traffic going the opposite direction, which is going 55 to 60 miles an hour. You cannot hesitate. You cannot stop halfway through that maneuver because the median is very, very narrow. So as I described last month to the Planning Commission, there won't be fender benders at this intersection. There'll be fatal accidents. And most of us thinking about our elderly parents or whatever can't imagine putting them in a facility like that where all of the establishments are to the east. If they want to go to Food Lion or CVS or whatever, all of the turns are to the east. So these people will be attempting to make left-hand turns across the highway where people are going 55 to 60 miles an hour. I wouldn't want that on my back. So I came again tonight as a representative of Rivergate, no reason to have been 60 people here, to appeal to you, to appeal to VDOT and the planning staff, which for some reason is very much against this right-hand turn lane. It is It is the safest option that we can come up with for allowing a home for the aged to be across the street from that intersection and be located on a 60-mile-an-hour highway. Now, we have worked very closely with Charlie and Cameron for months, which is why we're not here in mass. We agree with what they're doing. They've agreed with everything we asked them to do, and the only remaining issue is for the county planning staff, VDOT, and you, is a right turn only lane, which we believe will protect the lives of those people who are 75 to 85 years old and still operating a car. I remember my father-in-law at 85 would routinely run right through stoplights. And so I'm deathly afraid of what we might be creating if we put that building there. We have 60% of the residents operating a car, and they're in their 80s, and they're going to attempt to cross that highway going to Food Line. So I appeal to you, whatever power you have with VDOT, and certainly with the planning staff. They, for whatever reason, are very much against it. I suspect it's because we have trucks trying to enter the refuse center there. But for the sake of all the people who will occupy this residence, I appeal to you, not only from those of us in Rivergate who have to deal with this intersection, but the people who will reside there, to lean on VDOT to have a right turn only lane approved, as Mr. Lumpkin so accurately stated.
Thank you, Mr. Spence. Appreciate that. Public hearing is still open. Would anyone else like to come forward? And Mr. Spitzer, come on forward. And again, I'll just remind your name and address, please, and try and keep it to about 3 minutes.
I'll be less.
All right,
Mr. Chairman of the board, Kirk Spitzer, 13296 Beckford Lane, and I also am a resident of Rivergate. I'm not going to amplify any further on what Roger said. I'll just explain to you, habitually, people are creatures of habit. And Dad used to say, have good ones. I will go out of my River Road exit, go to Blair Road, go to the light to go to 288, period. It's about 0.4 of a mile extra. It's just peace of mind. Let the light do its work. Somebody can run a light at that, and you're never 100% safe. But the other thing about the traffic coming down that hill, people change lanes constantly. You think you can pull out right and make a right-hand turn because the right-hand lane's empty, and a car will. They're just, they'll move over. So, and I will say this: when we come out of Rivergate, we're kind of blinded looking left. We don't have great visual contact looking up the west, the eastbound lane toward the west. Folks coming out of the center will be looking west, and they'll have better view. But I just worry, like Roger and others, about the age and the, we're just not as sharp as we once were. And so I just would appeal to you to, I think a right turn only is the way to go. I think the light that's going to be built at the church should have a left-hand turn lane, hopefully with an arrow signal that just, and I would bet you most of those folks, once they get some experience, that's what they'll do. But I've just become, I may go out the Patterson Gate once in a while and turn left if it's like early in the morning, late at night, because I figure I'm okay. But my sense is, why not play the odds, use the traffic light that's been built at Blair, and just take that sense. So just want to echo that for you all to think about. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Spitzer. All right, public hearing is still open. Anyone else like to come forward and speak in favor or against or make comments on this application? Again, your name and address for the, you know the drill.
Yes, I do. Jonathan Lau, 1521 Mannequin Road. I'd like to revisit what Mr. Lumpkins brought up regarding the walking, biking, running trail. I did some eyeball, and I'm not sure I've got all of the squares and IDs correct, but I think if the pump station is 64107-4C, I passed my eye test.
Yes, sir.
I'm using the graphic that the folks with the request have provided. I think it'll handle maybe 15 cars right now at that pump station, unless there's plans for the county to expand. I'm not sure where the property line is and how far back the county could go. I was at Pocahontas State Park weekend before last, and down in the canoe rental area, they had a similar size parking lot, and it was chock-a-block full. I mean, there was no place to park, and you had the boat trailers and all. And I'm just now projecting my recent experience at a state park where I could go up the hill, and there was an expanse of additional parking, and walking another 100 yards or 50 yards wasn't a big deal. But once that pump station, 15 spaces are gone, where are people going to park? And I don't know how generous the developers are, where people now start parking in their parking lots. So 15 parking lots, I mean, we got the award, the county, Mr. Stamey is just doing his thing. The county parks are widely and wildly accepted. Is 15 parking spots enough? And how generous might the developer be in saying, well, you can we'll build you a parking lot. I don't know if they're going to be that generous or not. But I just experienced limited parking. I could take access of additional parking, but it's what I'm just eyeballing. It's kind of 15 spaces. Is that enough? And the light went off. Thanks.
All right, Mr. Lau, thank you. I guess looks like we own some land behind there. Public hearing is still open. I knew he wasn't suggesting a parking garage or anything like that. So, a roundabout. Anyone else like to come forward? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Let's see, board questions for staff, the applicant? Discussion?
Just for staff, I guess. So, so the concept drawing here shows the right turn out only. Was that originally the concept?
That has always been part of, since the applicant has been meeting with the residents, that has always been a part of it. When this went to the Planning Commission, the concept plan was not proffered, so it wasn't, but now that it's being proffered so that they can vest it, that's why it's a little bit higher profile of an issue.
Right. So is there, I mean, can you restate again what your objection might be to a right turn only lane there, just so I fully understand it?
Sure. So this is a 4-lane divided highway. This is where the median break is. VDOT has identified median breaks of where it's appropriate, where you have good sight distance. If you don't have the right out, like as the residents of Rivergate said, they don't have a restricted right out. However, they choose to typically go ahead and make a right and go around and do a U-turn. If this was not provided, it's not forcing people to cross 3 lanes of traffic to go west. If they don't feel safe, they still have the opportunity to go down a half mile and make the U-turn. But what we're saying is this is where there is a median break. We are concerned with adding additional traffic to Patterson Avenue and to the Wilkes Ridge Road, West Creek Parkway and Patterson Avenue intersection, and having considerable U-turn movements at that intersection when we know that it does have failing operation, especially during AM and PM peak hours.
Right, and that's right now without the stoplight, without benefit of the stoplight. Okay.
And that should increase, the level of service should increase with the stoplight.
Okay. So we're talking 130 units. Ostensibly, that's 2 people per unit, so a max of 260. How many trips do
the applicant
80-year-old?
Yeah. The applicant had indicated that with their, based on their statistics with their development, they indicated about 170 people Is that correct? About 170 people. The age restricted is at a much lower generation rate than thing. Both their traffic study and VDOT and planning staff all agree that this is a very low traffic volume generator. Right. And I think that's why VDOT's position is, you know, it's a low traffic volume, let's not put any restrictions on it. However, if phase 2 develops, let's look at it at that point when you may be having a lot more traffic.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Questions for staff?
Yep. Mr. Chairman, has VDOT done a study for this intersection?
The applicant did a turn lane warrant analysis, so we have some information on traffic counts and things like that. VDOT has analyzed this intersection. They have analyzed the right out, and they have determined that a restriction would not be necessary with the phase 1 development.
Sure. Ms. Hunter, just to clarify, right now, the conceptual plan that the developer has submitted includes the right turn out.
Yes, sir.
If the board so desires to accept the staff recommendation that to allow this forward, would the conceptual plan need to be modified to show that?
Yeah, and the applicant had, I think, indicated in his presentation that he'd be willing to revise any proffers to express, to recognize the boards.
So the conceptual plan would have to be modified to, in some way, to address staff's recommendation. If the board was so inclined to accept the right turn recommendation that the residents have shared and the developer has also expressed willingness to go along with, the plan that's already in meets those requirements.
Yes. So there could be a caveat added to the conceptual plan that the conceptual plan is proffered except for the, you know, the right turnout only.
The conceptual plan is proffered. So the only thing that I think might throw that a little bit is that it says shall generally conform to the portion of the conceptual plan pertaining to phase 1. Does that mean that the right turn is fixed, or is it generally conforming?
If it was showing on a conceptual plan, we would expect it to be there. And so what I think was being suggested is that the applicant would take the podium, and if they were at all willing to, they would suggest, please allow it, you know, we will submit a revised conceptual plan that removes that. Will you approve this subject to our, you know, providing that revised conceptual plan with it removed? It wouldn't be before you this evening, but they would amend the proffer in that way if they wanted to, and promise to send it. They would tell you the change if that's the change they were going to make.
So I think, as I understood the question, and they're proffering this conceptual plan which shows the right only. Is that
if you accept this plan?
Correct.
Then the right only would occur.
It would be required.
Yes. Yes.
That general conformity, it wouldn't allow the wiggle room to remove it.
No.
Okay. I mean, is that where you were going?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Would you like the applicant to come forward and field that question?
Yeah,
The applicant is prepared to submit revised proffer language that would allow for full turning access if so desired by the board, and I could read that to you. And this was, I believe this will be palatable to planning staff as well as the county attorney, but you can confirm that. But what we would propose is to, if the board requires or desires for full turning access to exist, we would leave the proffer, the conceptual plan that's attached as an exhibit to the proffer the same, but we would revise the language to read that development of phase 1 of the property shall generally conform to the portion of the conceptual plan pertaining to phase 1, except for the entrance feature, which shall be modified to permit full turning access to Route 6, Patterson Avenue from the property. My understanding is that would be sufficient if the county attorney agrees to give the board comfort that what would then need to be developed would require full turning access.
Mr. Baverman, would
while
you
you're still there,
go through that just read the language you said one more time, if you wouldn't mind.
What's this full access?
Pleasure.
I'm
if you
happy to read that one more time. I have multiple copies if necessary.
Bless you.
But the language would be revised to clarify that development of Phase 1 of the property shall generally conform to the portion of the conceptual plan pertaining to Phase 1, except for the entrance feature, which shall be modified to permit full turning access to Route 6 Patterson Avenue from the property.
That certainly, if you choose to proffer it, and the board accepts it, does take care of having this conceptual plan be appropriate with this language, showing the modification, and then not a new plan that already addresses it.
and then while you're there, if you could just confirm the previous discussion, which Supervisor Alvarez had asked, and the attorney had clarified that your current proffers the conceptual plan that includes the right only, and that if what you've offered in terms of proffers is approved, that right-hand lane only would survive in the actual construction, even though this conceptual plan is conceptual and the actual be generally in conformity with, but that right-hand only would survive.
Mr. Peterson, that was the language Mr. Baverman was just reading. He actually provided an amendment.
Well, wasn't this,
if
you wanted to
open up the full turn.
Full turn.
Correct.
No.
The
this was
language.
to modify the conceptual plan to be a full access. My question really was back to the previous question, which was what you're currently proffering, and it proffers this plan, and this plan includes a right only, and is that right only subject to modification in the actual, or is a conceptual plan with the right only obligate a right only? And that was something that we had confirmed, but I wanted to hear from, do you understand the question?
I do understand, and I'll defer to the county attorney on that.
I appreciate that, Mr. Baverman. It would be the county to determine that as plans came in with if they met the conceptual plan.
Okay.
And it would be the county's determination that in order to meet the conceptual plan as originally proffered, the right turn, and I always think I'm going to say it wrong, would have to be as shown on the conceptual plan. It's not, to be generally in conformance, it would have to be as shown on the plan.
Okay, so you're correct. That would be a judgment call by the county, not a judgment call of yours. I guess it was just the cold comfort of having you nod and say, yeah, that's the general understanding of all sides. But I understand it's not yours to make the final determination. So.
And I will say that if stronger language requiring a right turn only is desired, we would be willing to proffer that as well.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you. Thank you. Other questions, John?
Yeah, it's not through either.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
John,
go ahead.
I have a question for you, but I'd like before I ask it, Ms. Hunter, can you put up this on the screen, proffer number 14?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Baby, thank you. A couple of questions on this, and you heard the earlier discussion. I'm going back to the easement and the terminus of the future trail. And I know a lot of this is conceptual, so just bear with me. You see how it reads now. I'm going to suggest an addition at the end of that, and I'd like you indicated a willingness, but I want to hear specifically if we were to do something like this. Access easement, where it reads now, continuing together with both pedestrian access to the trail from the county pump station property and vehicular access to the county pump station property for users of the walking trail. Period.
It would be comma and then shall be granted.
I'll read the whole thing. Yeah. An easement shall be granted in favor of Goochland County, permitting the construction and public use of a walking trail on the property in the location shown on the conceptual plan, comma, together with both pedestrian access to the trail from the county pump station property and vehicular access to the county pump station property for users of the walking trail.
Let me address that in two parts. The first portion, my understanding from the earlier conversation is that staff can agree that the trail will connect directly to the county property. So it's access to the trail is not necessary because that would occur over county property. What the county may be interested in is access to the county property, so from there the trail can be accessed. My reading of the easement language that currently exists, which I have a copy with me if anyone would like to review, is that it's an ingress-egress easement, a 30-foot easement over the driveway location as it currently exists to the county property. And that's not specific to pump station vehicles. It's simply an access easement. I believe that provides sufficient access for anyone who wants to use the trail to get to the county property. From the county property, they can directly access the trail, and therefore no further easements would be needed, but for the proffer we're proposing to grant the easement for the trail itself. And I'll defer to the county attorney in terms of her interpretation.
Mr. Bavern, I have not had occasion to review the vehicular easement that's in place to the county pump station. So while I certainly don't have any reason to dispute what you've said about it, I'm also unable to confirm that that easement allows vehicular access for any purpose at all.
Sure. Would it be helpful if I were to provide a copy at this time?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
And if I may ask us that, so we know, well, we'll see this in a second, but it's a 30-foot easement. I'd like to just make sure from staff that know a little bit about roads, is a 30-foot easement over an existing driveway adequate for us to utilize that in the future to allow people to come, visitors to the trail terminus to come and go?
And I guess I'm a little confused about where we're going, the direction of this. The purpose of what we were trying to work with the applicant was not dealing with access or pump station parking. There is a utility easement that runs along their property. We wanted to make sure that the county could have an access easement to put our trail within that easement. That is the only purpose of us negotiating this with the applicant. The vehicular access, the pump station parking, none of that was subject to our conversations. There is a force main easement there, and we would like to be able to put a recreational walking trail on their property within our easement. And that's what this proffer. So I'm not sure if that answers your question or not.
So this,
How people will get there?
so number 14, access easement.
That's the problem.
As I understand what you this doesn't really have anything to do with the entrance or the road to the pump station or the pump station.
Correct.
This only has to do with the trail easement to construct and public use of the trail easement.
Correct.
Not the egress and regress.
Right.
To his point, I think he believes there's already an egress, regress easement on the books that provides public access to the pump station.
So those are two different easements. Let me show you.
I think that what I was proposing in number 9 might have been maybe it focused more on the access road.
Right.
Where it says specifically, an additional emergency access may be permitted to serve the pump station if required by the county. That was the one that I was proposing, if the applicant was comfortable, could be amended to say an additional access may be granted to serve the pump station and trails, period.
And
Right, and really
yeah, I'm not
should
sure
say
what
emergency.
9 with respect to that emergency vehicle access was in light of, deed of dedication from 2002 that while I can't track the property meets and bounds and so forth, does provide for an ingress, egress, and access easement 30 feet in width from the parcel.
So this is the access easement. The county purchased this easement not too long ago. It goes from Patterson Avenue, it goes around to here to the pump station. So the county purchased that easement for ingress and egress. The access that is being referenced in Proffer 14 is the ability to put a recreational trail within a utility easement.
So the way Mr. Baverman, through looking at all the documents that related to this, was able to tell his client is from Patterson Avenue through that pavement you see and then off to the right over to the pump station, that is subject to this deed of dedication for ingress and egress already without limit to only being for pump station use or only for utility or construction or anything. And so that would be the vehicular access that the county already has. Then on the back of the county pump station property, the property line there abuts their property where you see the walking trail start.
Right.
And so from the
That's not
moment
a
you hit their
question.
property, all the way across their property, people are
That's not a
walking.
question.
People are driving to the parking lot on the existing access road in the front. Again, I didn't have occasion to review this access document before, and I appreciate you providing it.
So there's no restriction in that easement for the public to use that road?
No, ma'am.
It doesn't specify.
It does not specify in the document I'm
Okay.
reviewing right
So
now.
the public can drive on that road and then walk behind the property. Gotcha. Thank you.
And the trail terminates at county property.
I defer to Mr.
One termination.
Certainly the parking lot and the access, I'm not sure where this is on the overall
My
trail.
point is you don't have to cross the applicant's property to get to the pump station from the trail. The trail
That's correct.
and the pump
The
station
trail goes-
are adjacent. So,
Yes.
Okay.
It goes
Okay.
to the property line.
Also, Mr. Lumpkins actually had an additional question, because that easement suggests 30 feet. And Tom or someone else on a road-related question, is 30 feet a typical width of a road to serve a more publicly accessed area?
Currently what it is today, and that's what we're using. So, but according to
Typically, access easement for the public use, not just for driveway service and pump facilities, would typically be 50 feet. Ms. Hunter, I know this wasn't discussed, and I appreciate what you're saying. I guess what if you can tell me, if the county staff can tell me that there are no concerns about the future of parking and access to the terminus of the trail, wherever that may be, I'll let this go. But I'm looking at this map on their application. I'm looking at a map. The county, the Henrico-Goochland County line is at the back on the creek. And if this is, if a trail is terminating at the pump station, I'm looking at this map, I don't see where we're going to have people park to get to the terminus. So but if you tell me, don't worry about it, we have a plan.
I'm going to tell you the project came in before we designed the project. And we do not have a full-blown design for this particular trailhead at this time. And so I can't tell you what we would desire there tonight, because we have never designed it. And so we were trying to accommodate the actual trail behind with this particular language. I think, you know, in typical planning processes for trail projects, we would determine proper access, we would determine proper parking. We were not that far along in that process as a county. This end of the trail is probably the last phase of the project. We've been focusing on other phases which are much further developed. And so I can't with full confidence tell you that we won't need more than this access road or that parking when this is fully designed, because we just did not get there.
And I'm just telling you, I don't want to vote in a manner that's going to lock us out of something we may.
Exactly.
And when we have an applicant who has got, I appreciate this. This looks like a great project. You've worked well with staff, and you seem receptive to accommodating what we're trying to accommodate. So while we're here working this out, I don't want to do something that precludes us from having something in plan.
Mr. Chairman, yeah, I think it's important to note that this is not going to be the only trailhead. We're talking about a trailhead at Broad Street. There's something planned for Hardywood, which might get a lot more traffic. So there's trailheads along the way. So it doesn't. I don't know that it necessarily needs one big area for parking. It's going to go through 2 apartment communities. A hospital at HCA. There's going to be a trailhead. So there's a lot of other opportunities for parking to access the trail. So I understand that, because but at the same time, it's not our property we're talking about. It's private property, and it's not what we're here for tonight. So I'm a little uncomfortable with pushing for something that we haven't even designed yet. So.
But we have access, we're talking about access to our property.
Yes, that's
And we
right.
do, from a staff perspective, from a 30-foot, that would be wide enough for a ingress and egress for public access. 50-foot is ideal, but certainly 30 would work. And Derek is very creative, and I'm confident he can design a top-notch system based on what's on the ground, and I don't think anything with this project would impact the long-term viability of the trail.
Could we continue on the access theme for just a minute and go to number 9, access?
Yep.
It speaks to a possible additional emergency access where we don't have any ideas about where that might be or how that might be configured.
No.
And right now it's only listed as emergency.
Mr. Chairman, at the Planning Commission last week, there was a proposed subdivision that committed to having an emergency access, and I think we're talking about a very different access. It was basically a minor road access with a gate that would be opened by fire and rescue. So I don't think we're talking about, I think that's what this is speaking to, is an emergency entrance, so in case there was a fire or a major accident or something there for fire and rescue to get in.
Okay, so, yeah, I mean, this would be the case where there perhaps is a vehicular accident on the, at Patterson, and the entrance is blocked, but the pump station needs to be serviced. So we'd have to have access to that pump station irrespective of, so that's where the second access typically comes in. But if we feel like we've already got access to the pump station through the road system, and we have access to the trail system through the pump location, and we have a proffer that if we need fire EMS emergency access, that we have that as well. I'm not sure exactly where that would go on the map, but it's one of the proffers here that they would grant that kind of an easement. So I guess that is the last piece of the access discussion I wanted to have.
One more thing. Sure. No, can't be last. So the fact that we have, and I guess this is a question for attorney, so the fact that we have the access, the easement to the pump station, that exists, that does not have to be mentioned in these proffers, because that already exists.
Yep, that's correct.
Everything here is in addition to that.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And then I want to get back on the turn lanes again at some point, but I'm done with this issue.
Okay. Anything else on access? We feel like we've got what we need on the access. Okay. And it's all been voluntarily proffered by the, good. They don't need to read anything, do they? Okay, good. All right, so moving off of access, other questions for staff or the applicant? Anything about the turning lanes or?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so the turn lanes. If we were to approve the right turn lane and make it be right turn only, if that's where we're going, and not anybody's going to vote on this.
And if we could just clarify, the turn lanes are the ones that are in Patterson Avenue, the exit restriction, you're talking about the right lane exit restriction is what you're talking about. Okay.
Exactly.
All right.
So if you wanted to go east,
yes,
you would still have to turn right, turn west
Yes.
And then you turn or whatever and come back.
Yes.
So it's the restriction.
Yes.
So if we were to approve that,
Mhm.
we can require VDOT to put those signs up? Signs saying right turn only?
Oh, if that was approved as part of the POD, all of the signage would have to be.
Okay.
Yes, that would be very clear.
Okay.
And that's when VDOT would weigh in
Yes.
Right.
at the POD level.
Right. And that should be, then 15 should really be rewritten if that's what we're going to do. Again, I don't know how anybody's voting or anything, but, because that's not clear to me.
Well, I think 15 is talking about the Patterson
Right.
Avenue lanes.
Turn
Not,
lanes, yeah.
not the egress regress.
These are on Patterson, not on the property.
I'm talking about Patterson, leaving the property on Patterson, yes.
No.
That would
these
be
are-
related to the
these are on
conceptual
Patterson.
plan,
Yes.
Proffer
These
12.
are on Patterson.
This is in the middle of Patterson, not on.
Traveling
the
on
property. Keep it
Patterson.
on
Just construction eastbound.
Traveling east or west on Patterson.
Okay, so from eastbound, you've got a turn lane, and then westbound taper onto Patterson.
The right out
Taper on three.
restriction is tied only to the conceptual plan.
Could we have it in the proffers?
Yeah, it's in the plan.
It's in the
Yes.
plan.
Number 12.
It's in the conceptual
It's
plan.
It's in number
because it's shown on the conceptual plan.
It's not written in words
Could
in the
it be written in
proffers.
words?
Ms. Lascalette,
What would prevent that?
the proffers are to the applicant. I think Mr. Baverman would like to respond.
The applicant is willing to proffer language specific to the exit lane from the property in accordance with the board's wishes.
I'll be careful with that. Thank you.
Other questions,
question for staff, if I may.
Ms. Lumpkins?
I understand we don't know the design of the traffic light at home. Do we have any say over whether they put a new no U-turn restriction on an intersection, or is that totally a VDOT thing that we don't know about and we can't have any input?
Another good
Oh,
question.
so heard.
VDOT will follow
Yeah.
what the county usually indicates. So if the county does decide to go with a right out only, they're going to help us facilitate that. So if it's a movement that can be made safely at that intersection, they would not prohibit it.
Thank you.
So-
That's good to know.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, and if Blair
Yeah.
Road there's no restriction to a U-turn there at that
Right.
light
Yeah.
at Blair.
Thank you. Yep. You can maybe take front seats here, because rather than have you get your exercise with your Fitbit today. Other questions, Mr. Lumpkins, Mr. Alvarez?
I have one more that,
Okay.
probably more than one, but do we have any other neighborhoods or businesses where we force a right turn that eventually requires a U-turn?
Nothing that comes to mind, and I'm seeing nodding no's from the staff also. So nothing that anybody could think of.
Thinking roundabout?
Mr. Chair, could you,
Yes, sir.
could you ask your distinguished colleague there to ask that question again? Because that's the case of Blair Road. In essence, if you're
You can,
traveling and you want to access a business on the opposite side of the road, you do make a U-turn there.
right, a lot of businesses are that way, yeah, you're right. If there's no
So-
medium break,
There's no
if
medium
there's no
break.
medium break, you have to
Yep.
do that.
So there
But this
are-
is a different case because the folks coming out of Rivergate, and I'm guessing there may be some folks at Rivergate that are over 80 years old, are making that left turn. And are able to make that left turn.
Or they are making a left
They're
turn.
making
They
a
are
left turn today, so,
Well, most
so
of them, I
it's all-
think, are going down and making a U-turn.
right, yeah, they don't need to do that. I guess my concern is that we are approving something if we go this way, and I'm not saying that I'm not for it, but I'm saying that we're approving something that could create a traffic problem. We have the problem today at the Oilville exit, where cars come out and it takes forever to make a left turn, so they make a right turn, make a U-turn, and then they make the people making the left turn wait even longer because now they're waiting for the person that made the right turn. I can see folks coming out of this facility, making a U-turn at Hope Church, and then not allowing people to come out of Rivergate because the traffic could be so heavy. So I mean, to me, it's kind of and I could see it from VDOT's perspective, would be this is just not a good way to move traffic properly. Right. You're going half a mile west to go east. But I understand it. I mean, it's not a safe place to cut across. The best design would probably be a traffic light, and you come out and you have a left turn signal and whatever. But getting VDOT to approve that would be.
And VDOT did indicate in their comments that this would not be eligible for a traffic light because it would be too close to the one at Hope Church. So even at full development with Phase 2, this would not be a candidate.
Other questions? I was wondering if, well, just wondering out loud if right turn only at Rivergate made sense too, if it makes sense here, but just wondering out loud. Any other questions for staff or the applicant at this point? Well, thank you very much. Board, now I'm going to look for board discussion. So, Mr. Minnick, would you like to kick us off and we can go right to left or clockwise or whatever the...
Yes, sir.
Just absolutely. Discussion, thoughts.
I'm going to make an assumption based on what I heard that the habitual turns made out of Rivergate are right-hand eastbound turns, based on what we heard from the presenter, that's probably the normal course of traffic. Now, I can't confirm that, but I'm gonna make an assumption that that's the habitual practice there, is to turn right and then go down to the bank and make a U-turn to go west. Is that right? Generally speaking. So my point in saying that is because I think we in essence do the same thing, encourage the same thing across the street there, is to make a right and then go down and go west and make a U-turn to go east. Just seems to be the appropriate and safe thing to do. So everybody seems to agree that this is a quality project, that all elements of design and those aspects are acceptable to the residents in the neighborhood. It's a good project for the county, and I think my opinion is that we do need it needs to be a right-hand turn only lane coming out of that development onto Patterson for safety purposes, which could change based on a Phase 2 study later on down the road. Could call for something else. So I would support what is presented to us, as I see no changes to the proffers and the proposal based on our discussion here tonight. So that would be my opinion on this project.
Okay, good. Thank you. Appreciate that. Ms. Oscoletta, you?
I'm in substantial agreement. I would like to see the right turn only specifically spelled out in the proffers. That's just me. No offense to anybody, but I'd feel better if I saw it there rather than on a plan. That is my remaining issue.
Okay. Mr. Alvarez?
You know, as I said, I think at some point we're going to have to revisit this as more stuff gets developed in that area. But I think one of our key responsibilities is public safety, and I think requiring only a right turn does more for public safety. I'm not sure that as a local government elected official, we have a responsibility to keep traffic moving fast. So I think public safety is probably more important, so I think, in that sense, I think the right turn only makes more sense. You know, I would almost like to see it on the other side, but we're not looking at a zoning now for Rivergate. But it's, anyway, and Bob made a good point that a lot of businesses, you can only go in one way and come out the other way. I just worry about once you have an office building and you have all those people making a right turn and then trying to make a U-turn to get back in the other direction, but that can be addressed at the time that that gets studied and approved. So.
Okay. All right, good, thank you. Mr. Lumpkins, thoughts?
Yep, I'll echo. I like the plan as presented. I would like to leave the right turn lane in there for safety reasons. This might turn into a question, but I just noticed something. The conceptual plan, site plan that we have on paper, that little jutting out portion of the property that's adjacent to the pump station. On the map that we see on the screen, it shows future parking phase 2 optional. On this handout, it just shows green space trees, which is going to be the official.
Well, there's actually a more recent one than that as well, that shows the parking.
Green space is old.
I may have your copy.
So what's on the screen is, I now have what's on the screen.
Well, it's actually even more current than that. It shows the parking.
Oh, yeah, there's one.
Yeah.
There's
That's why I
another
have
one, the smaller one that shows the
parking.
The actual parking. I don't have a copy of it. No, there's another one that actually shows the parking. Yeah.
So I take a look. I've got my notes in there, so I want to hang on.
Yeah, don't give it to the lawyer.
That's true. She touches it.
August 2nd. So August 2nd is
I
probably.
think I may have it.
There's 3 today, but.
The one on the screen is.
I'll give it mine. I'll print it one.
One on the screen is it. Good.
Here's the one with the parking. I printed it today.
Oh.
Right. That was submitted today.
I like what I see, and I appreciate the applicant working and continue to work with staff. Thank you all.
And the neighbors.
And the neighbors.
Board members, as you're considering and moving towards a motion, there's been a lot of discussion tonight. I will remind you that should someone wish to make a motion regarding this as presented, it would be as amended, because there were proffers provided different and a conceptual plan provided is different. So it would be as amended, even if you're not changing anything other than how it was presented by the applicant.
So would it?
Because there's a change from what was in the package.
Yes.
To what
so it'd be
you
as
considered.
Amended, as presented this evening.
Yes, that's a revised conceptual plan and the changed language to the
including
proffer
the right
12.
turn lane. Okay.
But, and if there's anything further than that.
Just one last time, you feel that the conceptual plan that was proffered includes the right turn lane, that would survive? Or do we feel like we need additional language on that? Or do you feel like what's provided is sufficient and anything else would be redundant?
What's provided is sufficient, but if it needs to be stated, that's not necessarily redundant.
Right.
Belts and suspenders.
Does it have to be? It doesn't have to be stated in a proffer.
It does not. The proffer that adopts the conceptual plan, and if you look at that plan, that the entrance lane has that hook that indicates you can only exit there, that it's not a wide open left or right.
Okay.
That's
but
how
if we wanted
that's
to
what
have,
it indicates.
if we wanted to have the language in the, can we put it in the motion to say that
it's
the
a
exit
proffer, so you wouldn't put it in a motion.
In the motion,
then how would get it in there?
The applicant would be willing
He
to
just said he would.
provide the language. Yes, what we. Yes, we would.
But we need
the language. The proffer has to be determined at the time you accept it. This is the latest. You are allowed to have a proffer changed at public hearing, but not beyond.
So,
Okay.
as
So now we just
opposed
need
and
the
amended,
language then.
reflecting a right turn only lane on the plan would be, I mean, because it's already there.
Yes, if he, yes.
I think the applicant is willing to make those changes. I don't know if it's necessary, as a plan of development comes in and there's a proffered case, the staff always goes back through the minutes and through the proffers. So the conversation tonight has been very clear that the board supports the write-out. It's shown on the conceptual plan, and that would be what the planning staff would expect through the POD process. So
okay.
I think I'm confident that we're fine with the way it is.
Okay. All right. I'll go ahead and share my thoughts. I think this project provides an additional housing alternative for the elderly in Goochland, which is perhaps at this point an underserved portion of the market, given the demographic changes, which is kind of a polite way of saying the graying of Goochland. From a land use standpoint, I guess I agree with the Planning Commission's recommendation, which unanimously approved the planned use of this location. From a compliance standpoint, it sounds like staff has indicated that what's presented to us complies with the county ordinances and the guidelines and the setbacks and the overlay district and all of those kinds of things, so it's in compliance. They're given it's an age restricted, or not an age restricted, but an aged community. There'll be limited demand for county resources. For instance, they're not likely to generate any school-age children, which is about half our budget. But there will be need for EMS and fire and rescue and sheriff and those kind of things, but those demands will be more limited perhaps than an alternate type of development. The county's interest is served in a number of different ways here, I think, one of which is the TCSD and the capital investment, which will be subject to the ad valorem tax. And by considering this evening, we would be vetting and codifying the work that's been done all along between the various parties, because, as we've discussed, the term home for the aged may disappear. But by considering it tonight and taking action on it tonight, that would seek to preserve all of the good work that's been done so far, as opposed to leave it up in the air if that term disappears. The open issues we talked about tonight seem to center around county access and the right-only turn lane safety, if you will, public safety. The access, I think we've worked that one through to where we're comfortable that we have the access that might be required going forward. As far as the safety goes, I generally defer to VDOT as our safety experts when it comes to roads. Of course, they have the responsibility for maintaining the roads as well. And it's my understanding that while VDOT may be okay with a full access for phase one, that by the time phase two comes along, my understanding is they'd be more inclined to recommend a right turn only. And if tonight we're considering phase one and phase two and not just phase one, then perhaps that right turn only comes into play. If we were considering phase one, perhaps you'd have a different discussion. So from a safety standpoint, again, I would defer to them. Right now, the applicant is proffered and is offering a right turn only lane already up front. The citizens seem to be okay with that as well. And it seems like long term that may be where VDOT's headed. Right now, with the limited volumes of traffic at that intersection, there's no need. Phase one will add additional volume, and perhaps that calls into need the right turn only. And then eventually, with enough volume, then lights come into play, but that's nowhere near being warranted at this point. So from a safety standpoint and access standpoint, again, I defer to safety to VDOT, and it looks like that's where they're headed. So it makes sense if you're going to approve phase one and potentially a phase two. If and when phase two is presented in a plan of development form, that's when VDOT would weigh in, and that's when they'd likely come to the plate. So those are my thoughts on the project itself. Is there any other questions or thoughts to share among the board? All right, seeing none at this point, I will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
I move we approve the application by Cameron General Contractors as amended and discussed this evening. requesting a amendment to allow for the home for age retirement community at 12330 Patterson Avenue.
Okay, it's been moved to accept the application as amended and
just to clarify, Mr. Minnick, that is as it was amended at the start of the hearing tonight.
Correct.
Thank you.
Second, Mr. Chairman.
okay, it's been moved and seconded by Mr. Alvarez. Mr. Badesky, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Alvarez.
Yes.
Mr. Lumpkins.
Yes.
Mr. Minnick.
Yes.
Ms. Lachelette.
Yes.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes. Okay, it's unanimous. The amendment is approved. I want to thank everybody for their indulgence and patience as we work through all of these issues. It's important that we try to get things right the first time and not have to come back and revisit them later. I also want to thank all of the citizens for their participation. We really do solicit input from our citizens because it helps us make better decisions as well. So all parties involved with this, thank you very much for working through this, and good luck, and I hope you have a successful project.
There is a second one for Cameron.
Yes. Yes, there is. You guys are going to stick around for number 2. Okay.
Don't they have to stick around?
The next item on the agenda, staff, would you like to present our next application?
Members of the board, Chairman Debbie Bird, Assistant Director of Community Development. Even with all that discussion on this project, there's one more aspect to consider. This is a conditional use permit to allow them to construct roadways and certain stormwater facilities within the flood fringe portion of the 100-year floodplain that crosses the property. Go through those are similar. If you'll look at the map behind you, I'm going to point out a little bit different aspects to the zoning map, and I'll do it over here so Ms. Lascolette can see. We'll switch up this time, sorry. If you'll notice on the zoning map, there's a line here, which is basically the limits of the 100-year floodplain. The creek is back here. You'll also see there's another line here, which when you have a 100-year floodplain and you do a flood study, you are able to break that floodplain into 2 basic portions. The area closest to the stream bed itself, which would be from this blue line towards the creek, is the floodway, which is a area demarcated that there can be no development within that area. The area from this floodway limit line out to the limits of the 100-year floodplain is what they call the flood fringe. And the flood regulations allow development, certain development within that flood fringe area, which is what the applicant is suggesting. So, this is aerial photographs, again, of the site, and what I'm going to do now is sort of zoom in on the site. Again, in blue lines now, we've shown where this 100-year flood limits are. This red line is that limits of that floodway. So the developer has shown 3 little areas where he's going to encroach in that fringe area. The portion here is for stormwater feature. The portion here is for him to take the sanitary sewer to connect into and make his connection. And then the portion over here is where you can see the drive aisle needs to be raised to take this out of the flood plain. So he'll need some fill, and those are the 3 areas that will be impacted by this project at this time. This is a companion paper to the rezoning because it's needed for the project. A CUP is required by the floodplain regulations in our code. The 2 sections cited there, one is allowing the use of parking areas in this, and the other is any accessory uses, of which this is. I'll also want to make it clear to you that the applicant's plan is to, as I said, place fill in these areas. And when he does that, once he places that fill and gets that area above the limits of the 100-year flood elevation, essentially those areas will be out of then the floodplain. Once the project is complete, he will then go back to FEMA, request a letter of map amendment. Those areas will then be taken out of the floodplain, and the CUP will essentially go away. But by the way the process works, he can't ask for that letter until the improvement's there, so we need this to get him in this bridge till we can get to the point where the improvement's done, and then he can move forward with the project. There's a community meeting held April 25th. 20 citizens attended. There were no questions related to this floodplain or any of the impacts due to this development. Planning Commission heard it at the June 7th meeting. No citizens spoke, and the commission voted 5-0 to approve the project. The only condition in this conditional use is that there will be the conceptual plan, which I showed you, and that the improvements within and abutting the flood fringe area shall generally conform to that site plan as you are shown on the screen. If you have any questions in regard to this, I'll be glad to answer them.
Ms. Byrne, if you could back up a couple of slides to the, let's see, one more. There you go. Well, I think that was it. Yeah, there we go. Third bullet.
Mm-hmm.
Once the improvements located within the fringe plane are completed, when you talk about improvements, you're talking about adding fill and changing the elevation. You're not talking about paving parking lots.
There,
which, in other words, to apply to remove it from the flood plain area or flood fringe, you're just talking about the improvements being adding fill and raising the elevation. You're not talking about completing the project and then going to get permission after the fact. This CUP will not authorize. You see where I'm going with this? No?
the CUP will allow them to be able to place those fill,
Place the fill
in those green areas.
All right.
And the improvements associated with that fill. Meaning, as in right here, this portion of the roadway will be constructed and paved and just what's needed for the project.
Okay, so there really is no paving or improvements on top of the fill. It's just fill with some buried improvements. There is some.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm going.
This is actually let me go back one more slide. So on this one, you can see when you come in the project driveway, there is a circumference road that goes around the whole project. This little corner of that circumference road, there'll be fill placed there, and then the road will go on top of that fill to be able to.
So my question is, does the CUP authorize the fill?
Everything.
Everything.
Yes. Everything that's shown.
So
everything in green.
In
Those
green.
3 little places in green.
The 3 little places in green.
We as a county can authorize paving roads in the floodplain.
In the flood fringe.
In the flood fringe, without DEQ or EPA or anybody else saying.
That is correct.
Okay, so then they can go get permission after, which would then negate the CUP.
Right.
Okay, so it's not the CUP for the fill, then they get it out of the floodplain and then they pave. It's the CUP covers
everything.
I was trying to get the definition of improvements when you said improvements.
Yes.
So, okay.
It's everything.
Mr. Chairman, so what it changes then is that then once they get DEQ to eliminate the floodplain or define that as not in the floodplain, they may not need flood insurance and that kind of thing.
Exactly.
Okay.
Correct.
So it just changes
ultimately, that blue line,
the risk,
is going to then change to the limits of that green. So they'll be taken out of the floodplain. Out of the flood fringe, which is part of the floodplain.
Fringe. Part of the reason I asked the question, Ms. Bird, I know we've been through this once before with the Aardworks, where they changed the elevation with fill, and my sense was that after they changed the elevation with the fill, then they applied to have it removed from the floodplain, and then that allowed them to do some improvements. And I don't know if that's because it was in the floodplain or the flood fringe.
Their situation was pretty much exactly the same. What they did is where the berm is, they first placed their berm where this red line would be. So that meant that everything in the fringe area was then protected and therefore could be in that fringe area.
And they could do all of that before they even applied to have it removed
from
the fringe, which is what we're doing here.
Correct.
Okay. I didn't know if you had to have it removed first before you could pave and build the roads, or whether you could pave and build the roads and then go for forgiveness.
Right. No, that's why I said they have to go through the CUP process because the improvement has to be existing on the ground before they can apply for the map amendment.
Oh, okay. Okay, good. Thank you. Other questions for Ms. Bird at this point?
Nope.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, would the applicant like to come forward and speak to this application?
I don't think they do.
There's no requirement.
No, we have
No comments? Okay, fair enough. All right. The next item is to go ahead and open up the public hearing. Anyone that would like to come forward and speak to this application, now would be the time. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Board, any additional questions, thoughts, or discussion? All right, seeing none, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the application of Cameron General Contractors, Inc., requesting a conditional use permit to construct roadways and stormwater facilities within the flood fringe portion of the 100-year floodplain area at the property at 12330 Patterson Avenue.
Okay, it's been moved to approve. Do we have a second?
Second.
Moved in second. Mr. Badesky, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Minnick?
Yes.
Ms. Lachelette?
Yes.
Mr. Alvarez?
Yes.
Mr. Lumpkins?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes. Vote is unanimous. That's approved as well. So thank you very much. Thank you for coming out tonight. There's 7 more if you want to stick around. Just saying. Just saying.
We should have locked the doors.
Thanks again. Travel safe going home.
We're having enough fun.
At this point, we've been at this for almost 2 hours now. I'm going to go ahead and say that we'll take a break for maybe about 10 minutes, come back around 5 after, and we'll resume then. So we're on about a 10-minute break. Thank you.
They were earned tonight.
Is that door open? Hey, Lisa. I was only half comfortable about maybe we should right only come out of the river. If you guys feel that strongly, that that's so dangerous, I hear you. I'm listening. Well, no, it's not dangerous for us, but I mean, because they told us they don't use it. They don't use it, so if we don't use it, let's put this up. It depends on what. Anyway,
I think it's good. Actually, the one thing that's pointed out to me is we have gaps in the internal process because I'm not sure. And yes, we didn't have any of that design. So what I said was accurate. Could we have prompted some more thought? Could have requested some of this application? Yes, so we're trying to do it at the podium.
Here, I can't get everything I want. I feel like you're not allowed to ask for things. You do know that, right?
But I think even Mr. Lau, my guess is that we may need more parking there when we go into design. I think the access piece got addressed. I think we'll, as long as we can get access to it, we may at some point need parking where we may need to acquire. We don't know that until we get into the design. Mr. Alvarez was correct too. We're going to have multiple points of access, so it's distributed. And so when we get into the full design, even the one that's under design is the one up by HCA. That one there, we were talking about 15 to 24 parking. This one has 15. And so yes, it's on the low end of projections. And I think we'd all love for these things to have that, but there's a little bit of unknown in the planning perspective right now.
You don't like to have 50 spots there instead of 15, but these guys are talking about they need them.
Thinking about stuff.
We have some land that's in the
And yes, we do have land behind the building, but most of it's floodplain, and that's also where the water pull out is for the kayaks and canoes at the walk ramp that's there. And so the trailhead ends there too. I think they were fair questions. I just couldn't give context to the solution at this point.
hours are left.
9:30 is still possible.
I may end up eating my words at 9:59's going. I'm going down, so I thought that would be easy. Yeah. There's no full form or compliance with changes to state law. We're not going to.
Yeah, the GC, we have the GCSD, the cloud. Shows what 9:30, 9:30 is possible. Yeah, 2 hours in the first one and then 3 minutes in the last.
Don't tear up your ticket yet. Don't tear up the 9:59 ticket. It still may pay off at the window. Still may pay off at the window.
Exactly.
Man, you gotta laugh, right? Because you can't, so you have to cry, right?
You do have to laugh. I mean, I'm picturing the traffic and the U-turn still there by Oak, and I'm like, that's a crazy place.
So did you have a 10 o'clock time?
Guess what? We could do them in 30 minutes.
I have the 9:59.
If everything, I just want to
rest.
tell you, we can still make this happen in 30 minutes.
Yeah, don't tear up your tickets for 9:59.
That's right.
They're still
I'm
hopeful.
saying before 9:45 we're done.
We do need controversial ones like this. We do need to vet everything, so people feel like we got
I
out
mean, people can see what is really vetting their things. And everybody has good input and thoughts. You know, all the board members, as you talk and think about it, you all have good thoughts. That's always good, your summary that you do.
Let the citizens know why we're thinking what we're thinking.
Yeah, you do good with the summary. Not all of them do that, but you do. It's good. It's good. It kind of recaps everything.
Keep it in perspective.
Yeah, so that people don't get lost. Because sometimes you're up there, you know, your mind just goes. You know.
Yeah, we're not voting on just the last 10%. We're back in the perspective. It's a good project for the graying of county demographics. Let's keep this whole thing.
Yeah, you gotta keep the big picture in mind, just not the few negatives. But we work through it. Really, we are. And we'll roll through these, I think.
Okay. I'm counting on you.
I'm counting 9:30 or 9:40. I'm hoping. I'm hoping. Jonathan Long could put it down. We'll see.
He's always the wild card.
I always watch his motion. Okay, does he look like he's moving to become a
If I can bang the gavel before Jonathan gets, if he starts to stand up,
Yeah.
I'm going to be a little quicker with the gavel.
Jonathan's
Bang,
saying.
bang, bang.
It'll be okay. We'll run through these. I'm very positive about it.
Okay, that might be Lisa saying it, but he was standing nearby.
Todd, you will roll through the presentation.
You have my word, I'll keep my word.
Because we really want to get out of here.
Not that I want to give long presentations,
Yeah,
but
no.
even with the community development last year, remember when we did that?
Yeah.
We had some long
Yes,
thing,
yes.
and JB was just 6 minutes.
Yes.
I did my presentation.
Well, actually, if I
I was
could
like, yeah, we're
shorten-
here.
Okay, you know what?
Any questions?
Feeling the need for some chocolate.
There you go.
I never drink caffeine after
It was a
lunch.
little long, and I always do a little, like, okay, it's been enough, it's been enough. Sometimes we take it a little bit, kind of shorten it a little bit.
Enough to get you
Allegedly,
home.
it keeps me happy.
So roll through yours.
I think it's
Because
dark.
we done taken all your time.
That keeps me happy. Yeah, they're supposed to be good for some, and I know that.
Oh, keep it.
I know he's against it.
So at this rate,
That's my third.
You can see them unless it involves something that involves them. Not like this, but it's related to them.
We can do it in an hour.
he has the best So if you start at 9, whatever I can to accommodate.
Well, the other board members want to
Something
I've never.
I recognize it, but
It's in the notes.
yeah.
I don't know if it were me, I still wouldn't. I'd be talking to him. I'd
have to throw the penalty, throw the flag, delay game.
I'm going back to you, right?
So who's the guy over there talking out there?
From this afternoon?
That helps me a
One
lot.
more information do you want from me?
That doesn't help me at all. I need names.
Ask me what we have for dinner. I'll tell you that.
I need names.
Chicken and rice and
asparagus
and tiramisu with strawberries in it. You need a bottle of water?
I'm good, thank you. For delay of game here. All set, thank you. All set, thank you. 3 times. It's delay of game here.
I've been drinking the county water, but it's got too much chlorine.
I'll send him a text on the phone.
Oh,
We want to know.
Let's roll. Let's roll.
We like that, Mr. Peterson.
Yeah, all right. All right.
Okay, if you please make your way to your seats, we'll go ahead and resume. We are on our 3rd public hearing of this evening. Staff would like to come forward and present our 3rd public hearing.
Yes. Good evening again, Joanne Hunter, Director of Community Development. The 3rd public hearing tonight is also a rezoning case submitted by David and Bridget McLeod to create one parcel. The property is located in the western part of the county in District 1 at 3500 Lowry Road. The comprehensive plan designates this property and all the surrounding properties as rural enhancement areas. The zoning is A1 and majority of the surrounding properties are A1 also, except you can see across the street a small dark green, and that was a rezoning application very similar to this one that the board just approved about 4 months ago to rezone that portion to RR also to create one additional lot. You can see in the aerial, it's difficult to see, but there is a mobile home located on this property down in the corner here or here. There is a mobile home, and the applicant is looking to retain a 5-acre parcel for their mobile home and then create the residue 15-acre as a parcel to sell. So this would be a plat of the property. The lot 1 would be the 5-acre parcel, and lot 2 would be the residual 15 acres because it's a total 20-acre parcel. No more by rights splits are available for this property. The creation of additional lots may be considered via a major subdivision application. However, major subdivisions cannot occur in the agriculturally zoned districts. So the applicant is requesting this RR zoning to create one additional lot. I do want to point out that the county's proffer policy does not apply to cases consisting of one additional lot. Therefore, it does not impact the proffer policy. There was a community meeting on May 2nd. 2 adjoining property owners attended. Both of them supported this request. The Planning Commission recommended the request for approval with a 4-0 vote. No one spoke at the public hearing. The request is consistent with the comprehensive plan. There is one proffer that the applicant has offered that the property would not be further subdivided. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Ms. Hunter? Nope, seeing none, thank you very much for that presentation. Brief and to the point. The applicant is here this evening with us, and would the applicant like to come forward and expand on that or add anything, or would you like to come forward to the microphone if you'd like to?
That's okay. We don't have any
Nothing to add?
Then I would just say we're not planning to sell the land. We're actually decided to build on it.
Oh.
It can be divided.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay. I will go ahead and open up a public hearing. Anyone like to come forward to speak about this application? Now would be the time. Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Board, any additional questions or discussion? All right, seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move approval of the zoning reapplication filed by David and Bridget McLeod to rezone this property per the application.
Okay, it's been moved to approve. Do we have a second?
Second.
It's been moved in second. It looks like this is rezoning 00001, our first rezoning for 2018. Okay. All right, it's been moved and seconded. Mr. Beneski, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Lumpkins.
Yes.
Ms. Lachelette.
Yes.
Mr. Alvarez.
Yes.
Mr. Minnick.
Yes.
Mr. Peters.
Yes. Okay, it's unanimous. You have your approval. Thank you. Next public hearing.
Yes, good evening again. The next public hearing is a conditional use permit application that has been filed by Robin Kaspari Lee. It's for a property on Shepherdtown Road, 2192 Shepherdtown Road. The total acreage of the property is 56.67 acres. However, they plan on using about 3 acres for a wedding and event center. Property is centrally located just outside of the Courthouse Village area. The property is designated on the comprehensive plan as rural enhancement area, and the property is zoned A2. You can see the little red circle. That is a separate parcel within the 56-acre parcel owned by the mother of the applicant. The shaded area in yellow, the circled area, is where they're proposing to have the event center. Access to the site is from Shepherdtown Road. It's generally in this area here. Their plans is to put the parking here in the paddock area, and then this area overlooking the lake would be for public events. I've blown up this area so you can see this is the lake area. This is where they would propose to have weddings. This building here is an existing horse barn on the property. The top floor, the second floor of the horse barn could be used for small private parties or for events like having the bride dressing and pictures and things like that. There's also a hay barn, which is located here. This is a picture of it. They could also use perhaps portions of this property, portions of the hay barn for the reception area. Most of the events that they are proposing are to be outdoor events. No new buildings are proposed with the event center. Most activities will be outdoors, as I just indicated. With the CUP conditions, they would be limited to 1 event per week. The conditions also limit the number of people to 200 people. No new buildings are planned. Sound would be directed in a northerly direction across the lake and away from Shepherdtown Road. All food, service, entertainment, porta potties, those types of things would be temporary. They would be brought in for each event and then be removed after the event, so they would not be there permanently. And as part of this CUP request, the applicant is asking for a parking waiver from the Board of Supervisors to allow their parking area to be gravel to keep it with a rural character. Because this is considered a high-impact use and that would be outside activities, staff is recommending a 5-year time limit to evaluate how the impacts are and the impacts on the neighborhood. There was a community meeting in March. 5 people attended, but they were all related to the applicant and staff. No one from the public attended. They did talk about public safety, rollback taxes. This property is in land use, so they would have to come out of land use for the 3 acres that's related to the public assembly use, and they would have to pay rollback taxes. At the Planning Commission meeting, the request was recommended for approval with a 4-0 vote. No one spoke at the public hearing, and I'll review the conditions. These conditions are fairly standard conditions. These are similar to ones that we've used for other places of public assembly, such as the Event Center on Broad Street Road. So the use would be as a place of public assembly. It could be used for weddings, rehearsal dinners, open houses, charitable events. Improvements would be in conformance with the site plan that was shown as part of the presentation. A plan of development will be required and to be submitted and approved before they do any CUP activities. This is the parking waiver. So a minimum of 50 parking spaces serving the CUP activities shall be provided and must be shown on the POD. An overflow parking area shall be required and designated on the POD, and then pursuant to the zoning ordinance, the Board of Supervisors could opt to invoke the parking waiver that waives the requirement for it to be paved other than the handicap spaces. Parking is prohibited on Shepherdtown Road. The internal access to the parking area shall be constructed in a manner satisfactory to the Goochland Fire Department, basically that it can withstand 7,500 pounds and provide wide enough access for fire trucks to get in and out. The property would be limited to a 12 square foot sign. If they have any lighting, the lighting would be dark sky compliant. The limit of guests would be 200 people per event. If they were to have an event that's larger than 200 people, they would have the option of getting a large crowd permit for that. The limit on CUP could only have one CUP activity per week. The hours of operation would be noon to 8 p.m. on Friday, Saturdays from 9 to 11, Sundays 11 to 10, and no events Monday through Thursday. In terms of amplified sound, no sound or music shall be plainly audible beyond any exterior boundary, and no subwoofers would be allowed. That would be where you would feel the bass. Same as in other similar conditions for other permits, the uniform security is required if there's more than 100 attendees and music and alcohol. Alcohol consumption, they must be in compliance with all the ABC laws. Fireworks are prohibited. Annual notice, they would need to provide the zoning administrator a list of times and dates of when they were having activities. Again, as I indicated, this is a high impact use, so we would be recommending a 5-year time frame, and then our standard transfer of ownership condition. The conditions have been reviewed with the applicant. They have not raised any concerns with them, and they are in agreement with them. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Ms. Losfett, would you like?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Page 14 of your slide.
Is that the staff report?
Well,
14 slide, okay.
Yes, sorry.
That's much easier to find than my staff report.
Okay, so you're saying one event a week, but they could have an event on Friday and Saturday.
If the event is like a rehearsal dinner for a wedding, that would count as one event. So they couldn't have a charitable event on Friday night and then a wedding on Saturday. But if it is for a wedding where you're having the pre-rehearsal dinner,
right,
that's still just considered one event because it's one leasee.
Okay, could they have an event on Friday, a regular event, and nothing on Saturday?
Yes.
Okay, so it says with
unless I misunderstood, I think you misspoke. The Friday event has to be related to or accessory to the next day event.
If they're holding a Saturday event, but what if they only want a Friday event? They couldn't do that.
The way it's written.
No. 11A requires that Friday events must be related or accessory to the next day's scheduled event.
Because you're connecting them together.
Yes, ma'am.
But what if there is no Saturday event?
Then there is no Friday event allowed. That's why the Friday hours of operations are written the way it is intended to say.
Yeah, if the Friday activity is not related to a Saturday activity, then it's not permitted.
It just seems odd to me. But, okay.
What is the reason for that limit, Ms. Hunter?
It seems odd to me too, to be honest with you. I think it's. I think the intent was to keep it small and not have multiple events. I think that language could be cleared up a little bit.
I mean, I can see if you're talking about a Friday and a Saturday. I get it. I get what you're doing there.
But yeah, it doesn't seem right to restrict it only to a Saturday night if somebody wanted to have a
If they
Friday
wanted a
night.
Friday event,
I agree.
could they have just a Friday
I agree.
Like, have the same hours as Saturday?
as Saturday? If it's
Yeah.
only the one.
Yeah.
That's just my thought.
I would agree with that change.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
Ms. Hunter, can you go back to one of the overhead pictures? Like
One of these?
yeah, that'll be. Where is the nearest neighbor? Is it folks this place here?
Yes. And then the next one would be, this is actually a barn, and this is the house. And then there is a neighbor back here, but I think distance-wise, this would be the closest. And they are talking about taking the sound and putting it this way over the lake.
Okay.
And just to give you some perspective, that is a 55-acre parcel, so in terms of distance, that's pretty far away.
I'm thinking about it related to the time limit, because even though it's a kind of a, I guess it could be a noisy use, but
One thing I did not point out, the property here is actually the property immediately to the east was the bed and breakfast that you approved last month.
so they could walk to the bed and breakfast.
It'd be a nice little arrangement to
Ride a
work out
horse.
there, yes.
Yeah, I was just thinking that we have a condition that says no sound beyond the boundary, and the property is large, so I'm just wondering why the 5-year limit doesn't seem like a nuisance type activity, but
Just intensive use. It's not like apartment over garage, it's a
right.
Yeah.
venue. But
And also it's the access off of Shepherdtown
Yeah.
Road, and I'll see how that works.
Okay.
Ms. Lascolette, could I clarify your inquiry? My understanding when I was reviewing these conditions was that they were only going to be allowed to have one event a week.
Correct.
Okay. Except that if they had, say, a Friday night rehearsal and a Saturday wedding, that was allowed. You're suggesting that they be allowed to have one event a week on any of the days, and in addition, they'd be allowed to have 2 events if they are related, like a rehearsal dinner and wedding, like
Yes.
of the same wedding.
That's where I was going.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify, because, again, that was my understanding of how the conditions were attempted to be written to only have Fridays be for rehearsal dinner type thing. But you're saying one event, any, and you can have 2 if they're 2 related. Say you could have I assume you even intend to allow, if you could have a Saturday rehearsal and a Sunday wedding. I mean, any 3 of those days,
Right.
one event or one major event and a minor event accessory related to it.
I mean, I don't know how the applicant felt. I'm just saying if they wanted to do only a Friday event,
Yep.
that's it. Why couldn't they do that?
well, you get
That's
married
all.
on a Friday. So
Right.
if you had a wedding on a Friday, were you thinking that Thursday evening arrival?
I mean,
or-
it's not just weddings. Other
Right.
events could be held here.
Right. Right. But I mean,
Yes.
if,
Could be a charity event, could be a, fundraiser or
Right,
something.
and
I mean, I don't know.
the limit that was envisioned was the only time you would have 2 events is if you had something of short duration.
Sure. Makes
And
sense.
it was related to the accessory.
Sure.
That was the only,
Sure.
I think, intention towards
Sure.
a limit. In other words,
And I get that.
sure, have it any Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, and the only time you can have 2 events is if you have some very short
If they're
event
the
another day that's
same-
related.
same Right. renter.
Same renter.
Right. Right.
Okay.
Right, but this is saying that Friday can only be the short event.
Yes, ma'am, I'm taking my pen out now.
Okay.
Just wanted to make sure I understood what you
Whatever
were
the
trying
I mean, if
to
the
get.
applicant doesn't care, I mean, I don't care.
I'm just at least sketching it out.
Okay.
Any other thoughts or questions?
That's all I got.
Real
Yes, sir,
quick,
John.
real
Yeah.
quickly. So, if we were to approve this CUP, number 2 says site plan improvement shall generally conform to the conceptual site plan attached as Exhibit A, and I saw Exhibit A, which looks like 2 pictures. Just kind of trying to understand the mechanism. Is that a tool that we can monitor? I mean, in other words, we can go, if there's a need to, we kind of go out and look, and that is a condition that.
Yeah, and if you look at, you probably need to look at 2 and 3 in conjunction with each other.
Well, that was my next question, was
Right.
3, what do we as the county get from a plan of development that what do we expect to be added to these,
Right.
quote, added to these conditions when they submit a POD?
So when they submit a plan of development, we will see very specifically what is the width of the road, what is the pavement depth of the road, can that road that is being brought in, can that withstand a fire truck? We will see exactly where the 50 parking spaces are located. They would have to show us 9 by 18 spaces. They would need to show us drive aisles between those. They would need to show us where the handicap parking would be located. That would need to be paved. If they're going to have any lighting, that would need to be shown on their conceptual plan. So those are the more detailed engineer type drawing things that we would be looking at, and what we would make sure it's administrative, it's done by staff, and we would make sure that it's in compliance with all of these conditions and that it's generally in conformance with what the site was shown on the site plan.
That helps me, thank you. That POD is going to tighten this up a lot.
Yes,
in
that
terms
is
of
the-
what the applicant is obligated.
Yes. That is the engineered details. So the conceptual plan that's always submitted with a rezoning or a CUP is sort of a high level. We don't want them to have to spend a lot of money. But then once they get the approval, that's when they would have to hire an engineer and do a little more detailed work.
And then the other question I have is on number 16, annual notice. Are we doing anything, are you aware of any other cases like this? That seems kind of curious for this particular kind of event. I mean, annually they're going to have to submit a schedule, and I don't know that, maybe they, if they're really planners, maybe they have the year planned out.
We do. We get this for all of our other event centers, Dover Hall, the event center on Broad Street. We also get it for places like Hardywood and things like that. And while we say annually, they typically work with us, and all of them have been very good keeping up with staff and give us something about once a month. So, and that way, if there's something, an incident occurs, we know, if someone says, well, we heard fireworks, and we look at their schedule or we contact them, they might not even have had an event. So it's just good for us to know when events are occurring to help monitor the situation. Yes.
To accept these
yes.
periodic notices and changes.
Yes.
All right, thank you. That's all I have.
Other questions, thoughts? Could you put up the satellite map real quick?
I'm getting there. There we go.
There we go. Is this a public road or a private road?
It's a private drive right now.
So it's shared between these two?
Yes.
If this were to change hands, they'd have a shared private road with a public venue or an event venue. We've had problems with that in the past. What's the thought there?
Right now it's in the same ownership as the family owns it.
Sure.
If it was to sell, by that point, the event center would already be up and operational, so it would be coming in afterwards.
Okay.
So.
'Cause there'd be a shared responsibility to maintain the road, and that would be up to the owners to figure out how they're going to share the costs of maintaining the private road, particularly if one has a very heavy use and one has a very light use. That sharing arrangement would be the responsibility of landowners, but I take your point that it's an existing use.
Right.
And we're not approving a use to change the rules for the owners.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I guess the question is the person living in that other house okay with this? And I guess we could ask them.
The mother, right? Well, that's a question for the applicant. But, yeah. Any other questions for staff? Okay. Seeing none, great. Thank you very much, Ms. Hunter. At this point, if the applicant would like to come forward and either add or take away or enlighten us on anything, you don't have to. There's no requirement. But just want to give you the opportunity if there was something else that needed to be said. Okay, great. All right, in case you didn't hear that, Ms. Hunter, they said you did a good job. Okay. All right, fair enough. Thank you. And presumably the other owner is fine with this. You are the other owner and you're fine with this. Okay, great. Thank you. That answers your question. Okay, we'll go ahead and open up a public hearing. Anyone who'd like to come forward and speak in favor or opposed or make comments on this, now would be the good time to come forward. And as you come forward, I'd just remind you to please give us your name and address for the record and keep your comments to about 3 minutes. So.
Good evening. My name is Cheryl Massey from 4204 Drew Ridge Drive, Louisa, Virginia, 23093. I see remnants in the CUP from the Bandits Ridge CUP, which our neighborhood was very involved in. And I might just say to Goochland County is to look at this and really think about how many of these barnyard bars do you continue to allow to saturate our county. As a resident, and in this case it's a little bit different with the amount of property that's in and around this, unlike Bandits Ridge. But as a neighbor, joining the properties to Bandits Ridge, let me tell you what we're dealing with today. Today we're still dealing with the noise factor, although they did work on that. It's much better. But we deal with, come after a Friday night event, we deal with red Solo cups and beer cans and all kinds of debris that come from these parties in our property. In addition to that, we also deal with the alcohol, people out drinking and driving. We recently had a truck drive through the side of our property, drove into our yard, did some damage, and he admitted he was at the Bandits Ridge and he'd had too much to drink. So that's a concern. And then also, Bandits Ridge, we see the parties going on, we see the events, we keep it pretty close. There's a couple things in here I just want to point out, and for Goochland County to think about. The hours of operation on Saturday night, I do believe Bandits Ridge cutoff time is an hour shy. So think about that. Think about that Sunday 10 o'clock cutoff and making sure that that's in line with Bandits Ridge. That's important to the neighbors around. Don't forget that sound really does travel further than you think it does as a neighbor. Additionally, the parking is of huge concern because Bandits Ridge is constantly overflowing. So you can go by there when they've had a big event and they're overflowing into the cornyards. So how do you police that? What is Goochland County doing to monitor that? And then lastly, the piece that I see that is missing here is as neighbors, we actually put into the CUP the restriction of holidays in here. Just because the amount of traffic that's on the roads in Goochland County during the holidays with the drinking, but also to give us as residents as a break as well. So I ask you to throw caution to this. Again, it's another venue that I look as an alcohol-related event that they're just saturating the county. How many more do we actually need? Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. The public hearing is still open. Anyone who would like to come forward, now would be a good time. And as you come forward, I'll just please remind you to give us your name and address and for the record, and keep the comments to about 3 minutes.
I am Robin Lee. I own Running Mare. We'd like to have the wedding permits, 2200 Shepherdtown Road. She is not one of our neighbors. Obviously, she's a neighbor of Bandits Ridge. I have written permission from all of my neighbors. I've spoken with them. We've met extensively. They are all very much in support and have actually signed my conditional use permit. So that's something that I think means a lot. They are all willing to come and show up and speak in my behalf as well. As far as parking goes, our parking is 30,000 square feet. So I don't think we're going to have any problems there either. So I just wanted to say a little something to that, because we are concerned with safety, and our neighbors are very important to us. We've had long-term relationships with them, and if there ever were any problems, we would remedy them immediately. So, thanks.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. Other folks like to come forward? Too slow with a gavel. Just too slow with a gavel.
Good evening. Jonathan Lau, 1521 Mannequin Road. This is kind of information. When does a week start? Because I was intrigued with Ms. Lascolette getting into the Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So Sunday, you could have something on Saturday and Sunday, I guess, and that would be your week. I mean, I just don't know. I know in the banking world when a week starts, but I don't know about on this. Because I was intrigued where it was like Friday, Saturday, one a week, but also Friday if it's part of Saturday. So could you do Friday, not do Saturday, and then do Sunday, and still be okay because Sunday's the new week? And it's no skin off my nose. It's just that you all write these things so intriguingly that I'm just sitting here saying, well, that's kind of curious. And I'm not done yet, because under uniform security, it includes A, music, B, alcohol, and more than 100 people. So if you don't have more than 100 people, you don't need a uniformed person. But if you have more than 100 people but don't have music, but just alcohol, then you don't need uniform, I guess. I'm not sure what the intent was there, and, you know, commas, y'all attorney people make all this stuff, commas and colons and everything else. So anyway, when's a week? Can you do Friday, not Saturday and Sunday? And it's, you know, okay, because Sunday's the new week. And then as long, I guess really the intention was if everything's under 100, you don't need uniform security. And I don't know what available means for a deputy. I mean, because it may be less expensive. I don't know what deputies go for, but if you just want to go to a private security uniform, but you got to start with a deputy. I think the way this is, you got to call the sheriff first. And if they're available, you got to use the deputy sheriff. Are we okay saying you got to use the deputy sheriff instead of using private? Do they have to use the deputy sheriff, or do they have the choice of using private? I read this stuff and I get curious. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Lau. Anyone else like to come forward? Okay. Seeing none, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Let's see. Maybe I'll ask our county attorney if we need to define when the week starts. We were pretty clear in the condition that Monday through Thursday, no events. Friday, if there's something on Saturday, but only one.
Yes, and the first thing I did was craft some language. I don't know if Ms. Hunter has also done it, but to address the clarification that you can have one event and you can have two if you have one that's a 2-hour in duration and related to the other and for the same user. So I did some of that in the earlier time frame.
Okay.
I certainly understand that Mr. Lyle could find areas for inquiry. I think he always could. He has a very curious and thoughtful mind. I think it's fairly clear that you can have one event on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday that are together. It was intended, and it's been used in earlier venues, though the board's always, these are conditions, and so the board's certainly able to change if the ones being provided by staff don't suit you. But for uniform security, it was intended that nothing be needed unless you had more than 100 guests, and that those three be together. That's sort of consistent with things like a nightclub has to have alcohol, music. There's not a limit on the number there, but, and then also it was intended that you use a deputy sheriff first if available, and then only go to uniform security if a deputy sheriff's not available. That was the intention of the condition as written. And
okay.
I'll certainly take a stab at it, and I did not think, nor would I guess, that the applicant would be opposed to a condition that allowed them to have one wedding on Friday, if that was the event. It's actually a more expansion of your use, not some huge expansion, but allows you to have an event on Friday or on Saturday or on Sunday. The weekly limit language in Proffer 10 would say a maximum of one event is permitted per week, except that 2 events are permitted if the 2 events are for the same user, related to each other, and one event is limited to 2 hours in duration. Then if that condition were written in that way, I would recommend that in 11A, you simply just include the hours of operation for Friday and remove the rest of the language. That's where it has 2 hours in duration and the relatedness of an event Friday to Saturday. And what that would allow is, as we had discussed earlier, it's most common in weddings, have the rehearsal there and a rehearsal event and dinner on any time, any day, and the next day have the wedding. That would be entitled, it would be considered essentially only the one event that was permitted.
Can I ask you just to read that language again? Now, we're dealing with condition 11, I guess, hours of operation.
Well, 11, what I recommend is that under 11A, everything after the 8 p.m. be removed. So it literally only lists hours.
Noon to 8, okay.
Right. But in the weekly limit on Chapter 10, that the maximum of one event is permitted per week, except that 2 events are permitted if the 2 events are for the same user, related to each other, and one event is limited to 2 hours in duration.
And where were we inserting that language?
In Proffer 10,
Number
in
10?
condition
Okay.
10, excuse me.
Okay. Where maximum of one event is permitted per week.
Right, and then
just expand
strike
the
the rest of
language.
it and include that or something along those
Okay.
lines. Again, it's sort of off the cuff, but I think that is going to the idea that's been discussed.
Okay. 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 Did the applicant hear and understand that language? Okay. I see a nodding yes.
Is that okay? Okay.
Because it is a marginal expansion of your more flexibility rather than less. Okay. Okay. All right. Excuse me. Thank you for that. I have a question for county staff. The notion of hours, this being different from Bandits Ridge or others, are these hours generally consistent with other uses of this type, or?
These are fairly consistent with the Dover Hall. The Bandits Ridge had specific neighborhood interest, and some of those conditions were drafted a little bit tighter in response to the neighbors. But in terms of generally, these are the hours. If the Friday ending at 8, if we wanted to change that to 9 or 10, I see no concern with that either.
Okay. Okay, so your sense is the Bandit Ridge was, if anything, more of an exception on the more limited side in response to neighbors expressing concerns, where the neighbors, what we heard here, are all on board with this and have been brought into the decision-making up front as opposed to after the fact.
And I do believe, with the large parcel, this is 56 acres, that the impacts are different than Bandits Ridge, where it's more of in a neighborhood setting. So.
Okay.
And for the clarification for the board, one of the things that our offices have been working together on are creating a uniform set of conditional use conditions for standard CUPs. Not that they couldn't be impacted by neighbor input, but at least sort of a standard way to start. And if this is approved even as amended by the board, that's probably the type of thing we would look to continue to suggest as conditions, and then again change them or tighten them either based on neighborhood concerns, or if an applicant had some reason they needed it differently, that would be presented to you. But certainly we want the uniform conditions to be, you know, akin to what you're looking for and interested in.
Sure. So if the situations were similar, we would like the restrictions to be similar.
Correct.
If the conditions are different, we can take that into account and kind of tailor it around the conditions and the neighborhood input from neighbors. Okay. Okay. Other questions for staff or the applicant?
Just one real quick. So, and to get to the question that was asked, or another question that was asked. So, how many total venues do we have similar in nature to this in our 298 square miles?
Yeah, for places of public assembly, we have Rasswick, Dover Hall, Bandits Ridge, Hardywood, Clover Hill, Adams International School. I'd say probably 7 or 8.
Clover Forest.
Clover Forest, yeah. And that is, you know, one of the identified recommendations from our Rural Economic Development Committee is to encourage agritourism and agribusiness, like these types of uses. So it is consistent with, you know, our strategic plan.
Did we, Mr. Chairman, did we answer the question about the day of the week?
I think
Monday the start of the week.
It seems to me like it's covered.
If we would like to, the language on the weekly limit could be permitted per weekend. And I think everybody would know then the Friday, Saturday, and Sunday is a weekend. So
yeah,
it's your condition. You're happy to write it that way. If
that makes sense.
Yes, ma'am.
Yep.
We're happy to do it that way.
Any other questions for staff? Okay.
One for staff, but I have one for the applicant if she is so inclined.
All right. Well, why don't I, we've had 3 people speak in the public hearing. I'll just go ahead and make sure the public hearing's closed before we entertain questions. And okay, so public hearing has been closed. Now we can ask the applicant to come forward. We've got a couple more questions for you. So, thank you.
Hi, Ms. Lee. Thank you. Just, would it negatively impact your business to have a 9 o'clock shutdown on Sunday evening?
No, it would not.
And would it matter to you if we extended Friday to be the same hours as Saturday, 11 p.m.? Is that important?
That's fine. I tried, you know, I would prefer to encourage all of my customers to end a little earlier, just because we do have livestock, animals, and neighbors, and most of our neighbors have animals. So we're really trying to encourage quieter events. So having an earlier shutdown is not a big issue for us.
Would the earlier shutdown be beneficial to you to say, I'd love to have you stay till midnight, but the county won't let me?
It might actually be beneficial, I mean, yes.
We're happy to play that role if that's one that you feel.
Sorry, but the county says you have to leave.
Yeah, blame on us. So when would be a good time on Friday to wrap things up? As far as the conditional use goes, just if you had a number, would it be not 9,
10.
10:30 sounds great. That actually gives them time to pack up and leave and be gone by 10:30.
Okay.
Which means everything really needs to stop around 9:45 for people to get packed up and finish.
So would you be okay with that for Friday and Saturday night?
Yes.
Okay.
And taking Sunday back to 9 p.m.?
That sounds reasonable. Sunday is a family day, and
School
Monday
night.
everybody has to work. So that sounds reasonable for the neighbors and myself as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. That's very helpful.
Thank you for coming back.
Thanks, appreciate it.
Any other questions before she takes a long walk back? I hate to ask you to come up too often, but anything else?
I'm
No?
good.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Okay. All right. Board, any other questions for staff or the applicant? Any clarification? We addressed the parking, the noise. There's a condition about the property line. Yes, the idea of holidays came up. I don't know if that's important to discuss.
I think what was brought forth is that that was a particularized restriction because of the neighbors
So
adjacent to
close.
Bandits Ridge. That hasn't come up from these neighbors.
Proximity. Okay, so maybe that was another one of the custom tailored aspects of that particular one. Okay. All right, so make sure we touch all the bases here.
Mr. Chairman, there
Yes,
was
sir.
a question about whether we require that the sheriff's department has first right of refusal. I believe we have that in all of our CUPs,
We did.
but is that a mandatory thing?
Well, I mean, I think, at least from my standpoint, part of that has its origin in the sheriff has overall responsibility for safety in this county. And if these kind of applications come to him, he is in the best position to decide how to keep the county safe. So if he gets the first look at these things, maybe that's a good thing to keep him in a loop. I don't know. Again, that's my personal thought. I don't know if you have other thoughts on that.
I mean, personally, my opinion is, I think that process, encourages communication and an added layer of safeguard, to understand what events are being, what events are underway in the county. I don't, never really occurred to me as a,
okay,
my opinion, from my opinion.
Okay. Did we touch on all the issues that were raised? I think I've exhausted my list. Anything else? Okay. If that's the case, if there's no more questions and discussion, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to make a motion to make a couple of amendments, but I move that we approve the application by Ms. Robin Lee requesting a conditional use permit for a place of public assembly at 2192 Shepherdtown Road, on her property there, to operate a wedding and event venue, and for a parking waiver with the following modifications to the conditions. Condition number 10, in my motion I would propose that it reads, a maximum of one event is permitted per each Friday through Sunday period. And then number 11, I might need to come back and get some help on adding what we did number 10.
Yeah, number 10.
To help me. But the other changes, hours of operation in condition number 11, Friday noon to 10:30 instead of 8 p.m. We'll still keep the 2-hour duration there on those days on Friday. Saturday ending time of 10:30 change, and Sunday ending time of 9 p.m. And that means we can strike the all amplified sound shall cease at 9 p.m. as well. Now, if somebody wants to help me, how do we deal with the 2 events or related events? I think we can probably put that in number 10. So
Yeah, I think we fixed number 10.
Ms. McGee, did you have
I do
suggested
have
language on that?
Let me clarify one thing, though. The language I drafted for 10 didn't say that Friday had to be limited to 2 hours.
Right.
It just said if you have a second event that's related, one of the events has to be limited to 2 hours.
So that's actually.
So I just wanted to make sure before I started down the language I had that, because that would change what you said about hours of operation.
All right,
You had it right.
Because if we just want to, is that?
It's actually 11A, where you mentioned Friday noon till 10:30. The contemplation was to strike the follow-on language that says with events limited to 2 hours in duration, Friday events must be related. Strike that language and then use the.
Just leave the hours.
Right, everything we strike on Friday.
And the reason was that way if they had a wedding on a Friday, it could be a longer than a 2-hour event. Weddings typically might be 3 or 4
It's not
hours
just weddings.
events. Yes, ma'am. There are retirement parties and all sorts of other things that could
Right.
occur.
That's, thank you. So, yeah, correct it to just the hours of operation and ending at 10:30 p.m. on Fridays and delete the rest of the condition as it is in.
Right.
And then change the Saturday hour and the Sunday hour, as you mentioned.
Yes. Yep.
And then take that 2-hour limit, really carries back to number 10. And then I think, Ms. McGee, you had the language for number 10 that might.
I do, if this is consistent with what the board is interested in doing with the condition. A maximum of 1 event is permitted each Friday through Sunday, comma, except that 2 events are permitted if the 2 events are just for the same user, comma, related to each other, comma, and 1 event is limited to 2 hours in duration.
Does that sound consistent with your motion?
That is my motion.
Okay. Okay, does everybody understand the motion that's been made?
I think so.
Okay. That said, does anyone want to second that exact motion?
I will second that exact motion, Mr. Chairman. I'll take the easy out.
It's been moved and seconded to approve as amended and as discussed. All right, roll call vote, please.
Ms. Flashlet?
Yes.
Mr. Minnick?
Yes.
Mr. Lumpkin?
Yes.
Mr. Alvarez?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes. Okay, it's unanimous. You have your approval. Thank you. And good luck to you. We're on to number 5 for this evening.
All right, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Mr. Badesky, I'm Todd Kilduff, Deputy County Administrator for Community Development and Economic Development. And we have a public hearing for an amendment to 2 sections in the Public Water and Sewer Code, Chapter 14. Section 87 is water related and Section 142 is sewer related. Back in around 2015, and this predates you, Mr. Lumpkins, but back in 2015, the board approved an ordinance amendment on adding a 20% adder to connection fees for any parcel of land that wasn't originally in the Tuckahoe Creek Service District that entered the Tuckahoe Creek Service District, and that 20% adder would be added to the connection fee itself. Just to put that in perspective, a connection fee for a house for water and sewer is $10,000. So this would be 20% on top of that, so the house would be $12,000. And again, that applies to only parcels of land that aren't currently in the Tuckahoe Creek Service District. So what that does is it leaves us with 3 scenarios. The first 2 we've always are actually clear cut and easy. If you're already in the district, you pay a connection fee and you don't pay the adder. You're already in. If you're not in the Tuckahoe Creek Service District and you enter, you have the 20% added. But the third bullet point is really what this amendment is about, is the existing language in the ordinance doesn't really speak to how that 20% is applied to any parcel of land that may be split between a Tuckahoe Creek Service District parcel and a non-Tuckahoe Creek Service District parcel. I'm a visual person, so I created a graphic that would better illustrate what this actually means. If a developer was to buy two parcels of land, with the left one being the Tucker Creek Service District and the one on the right being non-Tucker Creek Service District, and they wanted to subdivide those together and let's say put a cul-de-sac in, if you go down to the lower image, you'll see Lot 1, Lot 2, and Lot 3 at the end of a cul-de-sac. Lot 1, as you can see, is already 100% in the parcel that was already in Tucker Creek Service District, so that would not have the 20% added to it, as I mentioned before. Lot 3, on the right side, would have the adder because it is 100% not inside of an existing Tucker Creek Service District parcel. And to be clear, that parcel would have to be brought into the district, of course. So it's a little bit mislabeled on the bottom. It says non-TCSD parcel, but I wanted to make sure that that carried forward as what that actually is. So the question again is Lot 2, how do we handle that? It's actually split halfway and halfway in this exhibit, but it could be portioned anyway. It could be a 90-10 split, it could be 64, or however you want. But I just have a 50-50 split here to better illustrate that the code doesn't really speak to how we apply a fee to that if we apply it at all. So from the staff's perspective, we're actually recommending not having a connection fee adder on those properties that are split in any way, however you want to portion it out between a Tucker Creek Service District parcel and a non-Tucker Creek Service District parcel after that parcel has entered the district. Just to be clear, all those parcels, all those lots would have the connection fee anyway. Really what we're just talking about is that 20%. So what we're proposing is the next two slides. This slide is water specific. The next one's pretty much identical. It just references the sewer portion of the code. If you notice in the middle, there's a strike through that says for any parcels that are added to the district subsequent to January 2015, we actually removed that and revised it a little bit to the underlined section. Now I'm actually going to read just that one sentence there in the middle that starts with "and." An additional local facilities fee equal to 20% of the normal connection fee in place at the time of connection to connect to the county water service shall be imposed for any connection if no portion of the parcel was in the district at that time. So again, that just sort of reiterates us saying if there's any parcel that's split in any way, shape, or form, that parcel would not have the adder. Skipping to the next slide, which is basically identical. It just replaces the word water with sewer. Any questions on that amendment? I know I kind of flew through it, but there's not much to it. But any questions that you may have regarding this amendment?
Any questions for staff?
No.
None? Okay. Thank you for that presentation.
Sure.
And here the county is the applicant, so there is no applicant to... so I will go ahead and open up a public hearing. Anyone who would like to come forward and comment on this application, now would be the time. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Board, any additional discussion, questions? Nope. Seeing none, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
I move we amend ordinance 14-87 and 14-142 to clarify local facilities fees that are imposed for connections to water and sewer in the Tuckahoe Service District.
Okay, it's been moved to approve. Do we have a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Mr. Badesky, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Minnick?
Yes.
Ms. Lachelette?
Yes.
Mr. Alvarez?
Yes.
Mr. Lumpkins?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes. It's unanimous. That's approved. On to the next item.
Todd Kildiff again, Deputy County Administrator for Community Development. And we have this is another public hearing for amendment to ordinance section, or chapter 14, section 251, which is also related to the water and sewer section of the county code. Sorry, I'm skipping ahead of Lisa here. There we go. Thank you, Lisa. So just a quick background on what the district is. The Tuckahoe Creek Service District, more commonly known as the TCSD, it's a water and sewer service district that was created in 2002 to provide water and sewer services to certain areas of the county and to provide a mechanism for payment. And as we speak today, there's approximately 700 parcels that are in the district. And since 2002, several parcels have actually entered the district. And that's really what this proposed amendment is about. This request is from PwC Properties, LLC and Riverstone Group, LLC. They are requesting to add 12 parcels to the Tucker Creek Service District. They total approximately 55.68 acres, and they are also part of the neighborhood called Mosaic. And just to be clear, these 12 parcels are not in addition to what Mosaic already is. I'll have an image on the next slide showing that they're actually still within the Mosaic boundaries. And they did fill in an application, as all applicants are supposed to do, and it was filed on May 4th. So it's a little difficult to see, but there's a black outline surrounding the Mosaic neighborhood. The 12 parcels that they're requesting to enter the Tuckahoe Creek Service District have a red hatch around them. It's a little difficult to see the separation, but there are 12 parcels there. And Capital One is just to the northeast, and 288 is on the west side, or on the east side of that image. The 12 parcels today total about $1,359,200. That's their current assessed values. The applicant did request in their application to waive the 20% adder on top of the connection fees for those 12 parcels, but due to the recently approved ordinance amendment, that doesn't necessarily apply anymore because we now have clear guidance on how to apply for that. And I actually did inform the applicant of that, and they were fine with it, so they had no issues with it. The ordinance amendment would have all 12, I won't read them unless you want me to, all 12 parcels added to it in Chapter 14, Section 251. Any questions for me?
Any questions
on
for
this
staff?
amendment?
Nope.
Seeing none, thank you for that presentation. All right, we'll go ahead and open up a public hearing. Anyone like to come forward? Now would be the time. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Any additional discussion or questions, board? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
I move we amend Section 14-251 of the Goochland County Code to amend the boundaries of the TCSD to include the tax map parcels as listed in our packet.
Okay, it's been moved to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
Tie score. It's been moved and seconded. Mr. Badesky, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Alvarez.
Yes.
Mr. Lumpkins.
Yes.
Ms. Lachelette.
Yes.
Mr. Minnick.
Yes.
Mr. Peters.
Yes. All right, that is unanimous as well. That is approved. The next item. Number 7.
All right, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Mr. Badesky, Todd Kilduff again, Deputy County Administrator for Community Development. We have a proposed ordinance. The previous two were amendments. This would be a new ordinance. There's my little clicker here. This one is specific to golf carts and utility vehicles being used on certain public roads. And this presentation I have set up sort of in two parts. The first part is really the ordinance itself and what it means and where it came from. And then if the ordinance was to be approved, we thought there would be value in you understanding what that would mean for the county. So that's sort of the second part of the presentation. It sort of goes through the policies and procedures that would take place if this ordinance is approved. So just a quick background. We've had some citizens that have expressed interest in operating golf carts on neighborhood public streets. Unfortunately, we don't have anything in our code as we speak about that, so it's actually illegal. But the Virginia Code does allow the Board of Supervisors to adopt an ordinance for this request. And how the state code is written, it includes golf carts and utility vehicles. We're not just talking golf carts at the moment. It's both combined. And there's a lot of considerations that are taken into effect. It's speed, volume, and as you can see there on the bullet point, existing motor vehicle traffic, and most importantly, safety. This proposed ordinance would allow the Board of Supervisors to designate certain streets and highways to operate golf carts and utility vehicles. And just to be clear, this is just really a vehicle that we can use, no pun intended, to allow neighborhoods to apply through a separate public hearing process that they would have to go through to be allowed to use golf courses. So this is not an umbrella over the county saying everyone can now use golf carts if this is approved. This is really just a mechanism for neighborhoods and residents on roads, which I'll explain what that means in just a second, residents on roads to apply to enter as an ordinance amendment so that they can use golf carts and utility vehicles on their roads. Golf course communities are not affected by this. They actually can already, based on the state code, use golf carts to traverse public roads. It actually has, it's a little bit more in depth. There's a lot of information in the state code regarding this topic. They actually say if you live within a half mile of the golf course, you can still use your golf cart to drive to the golf course only. I think you have to be within a half mile of the clubhouse, but you can still do it, even though it's not for the golf cart use yet. You're just getting to the clubhouse, and then you're using a golf cart. So they've put a lot of thought into it from the state's perspective. So what does that mean for the ordinance itself? This would be the full ordinance proposed. It would be a new section 9-27. And there's 2 paragraphs. I won't read them word for word, but basically the first paragraph states that no one can operate a golf cart or utility vehicle on a public road unless the Board of Supervisors designates the road as such, and that VDOT also approves it. It also provides brief guidelines and standards for that. The second paragraph basically states the rules that need to be followed to be in line with the state code. So that's what I'm considering the first part of this presentation. The second part is, if you were to approve this, what does that mean? Well, the staff has already put together proactively just an application, just in case this is approved. We wanted to make sure we were prepared for it. An application and some steps and some guidelines for the residents if anybody was interested. What it is it says that the first step would be a petition. 75% of the residents on a street must sign the petition. Now, earlier I said I would clarify neighborhood versus street. That's what this speaks to. The state code doesn't allow you to do a neighborhood. So let's say Kinloch neighborhood or Parkside Village could not apply as a neighborhood. It has to be each individual street. So if there's 15 streets in your neighborhood, there has to be 15 petitions. There has to be 75% of each person on that street to sign that petition. The second step is, if the petitions come in, then the county staff would review and provide any coordination at that point. And there's a few other steps involved in that, but one of the examples would be sign cost. You would have to put up signs, and I'll get into that a little bit later. But the third step would be the Board of Supervisors consideration, which would be a public hearing. If that's approved, then VDOT will hear it. And you have to go through all those steps first. Once VDOT hears it, they actually have their own land use application permit they have to fill in. And at that time, they can still deny it. They can still say no. Even if we've approved it, they can still say no. They have that opportunity. But if they say yes and they provide the permit, then step 5 would be implementation, which would be, let me go to the next slide, sitting with the neighborhood and going over what proposed signage there would be in the neighborhoods. So the first image there is the roads must have the appropriate signage, and these are just examples of what that would look like. There has to be a posted speed limit of 25 miles per hour or less. And this is interesting. Anyone driving a golf cart or utility vehicle has to be a licensed driver. It can't be somebody who does not have a license. So a 10-year-old can't hop in a golf cart and drive to his friend's house. It has to be somebody who has a driver's license. The golf cart or utility vehicle must must display a slow-moving vehicle emblem, and we put a little image there of what that would look like. And you can operate only between sunrise and sunset if you don't have lights. But if you do have lights on your golf cart or utility vehicle, then you can operate after those hours. And everyone would have to abide by the laws, rules that are applicable to all motor vehicles. Again, no roads are proposed in this ordinance. However, we thought it was important that you know that there is a neighborhood that has 2 roads in the western side of Goochland that is considering an application as we speak. And we also felt it was important to let you know a little bit more about utility vehicles. We all know what a golf cart is, but what is a utility vehicle? The state code does define that on the second bullet point here. Utility vehicles are defined as a motor vehicle that's designed for off-road use, has a powered motor, and is used for general maintenance, security, agriculture, and horticultural purposes. So they do have a definition for what that actually is. And we were curious what a lawnmower would be classified as, and it does specifically say in the state code that lawnmowers are not utility vehicles. They actually did call that out.
Can't drive that.
Learn something new every day, right? In VDOT's land use application, they are requiring the locality is, the burden's on us to purchase signs, but we would actually have that burden be on the applicant. So I wanted to make sure that was clear, that the community or road citizens that live on those roads, they must purchase, install, and maintain the signs. So there's a lot of information here with these golf carts. It's not just very simple. The state code has several pages that speak to it. VDOT's land use permit application is about 5 pages, but if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Any questions for Todd?
One thing I just wanted to clarify for the board members is that the 75% on the petition, that was determined through discussions with the board. The state law doesn't have a number, but that was a number we took from the board and with staff's input as being an appropriate number for feeling that the roadway should that you have the permission or request of enough residents to do it. But it's not, 75 is not a state mandated number.
Okay, good. Thank you for that. Any other questions or thoughts or discussion? Okay, I will go ahead and open up a public hearing. Anyone like to come forward and speak about this?
Finally.
Again, thank you. My name is Cheryl Massey, 4204 Drew Ridge Drive, Louisa, Virginia, 23093. I am a resident of Shelton Ridge. We have been using golf carts in our community for about 20 years to move around our community. Through a recent incident with Goochland County, we have found out that it is not legal. However, we have multiple carts in the neighborhood that are operated by many of our elderly folks, and myself included. I actually use my golf cart to go service the elderly people in my neighborhood who I take care of quite frequently, and sometimes it's just faster to hop on the golf cart and go down the street. So with that being said, enough of our neighbors have rallied around, and we are in the process of the petition. So with that being said, we're in support of it. Our neighbors very much. There's a couple of situations. One that just kind of gets to you is that one of our neighbors, he uses his golf cart daily to take his 91-year-old mother-in-law to the pond to watch the ducks. So since the whole issue came up with the Goochland County, police officer, we certainly wanted to make this legal for our residents and abide by the laws in hopes that the board would actually approve this ordinance. So thank you very much for your consideration. We sincerely appreciate it.
Great. Thank you for those comments. Anyone else like to come forward? Public hearing is still open. There's no requirement for Jonathan Lau to come forward. All right, well, seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Board, any discussion or questions?
I do have a question.
Yes, sir.
Killed off or somebody was that 75% of property owners, if you have a married couple or multiple owners, are we going to be looking to get unanimous from the owners, or if these folks submit an application, we just take...
What if they don't agree?
We'll just take one signature of an owner, or somebody will be checking?
Right. Yeah, Tara, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it was just one individual who lives in the house. That's one of the owners. Yeah, that was the consensus. That'd be a thumbs up. Yes, sir.
Per property, I guess.
One vote.
Yeah.
One vote.
And I believe we clarified that as we were preparing the petition document.
That's right.
Okay. Mr. Alvarez? Yeah.
And how much, this is probably for Tara, how much flexibility would we have with the number? Like say there's a cul-de-sac that only has 2 houses. One is for, one's against.
Well, if you put it in your ordinance as it is, you have no flexibility. Right now, it's written into the ordinance that at least 75% of property owners adjoining have to agree, have to request.
So I guess my concern would be that we could have a cul-de-sac in the neighborhood. I know it's per road, so all the other roads could agree, but the cul-de-sac would not. And I'm not sure how we would tell people don't turn down the cul-de-sac because you'll be arrested.
Is that taken care of through signage?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Assuming VDOT would allow that. And again, there is this concept that VDOT has. It's in the procedures about there being a plan, a transportation plan. So I don't know that VDOT would say, we'll let you do everything except for that one cul-de-sac. But assuming they do, then yes, it'd be taken care of by signage.
So after we approve this, then VDOT still has an opportunity to say yay or nay.
On an individual case-by-case basis.
Yeah, and the actual language that they have is, they say, and I have their land use permit here, it says, however, VDOT does have the authority and the responsibility to overturn the designation if it is deemed that golf carts and utility vehicles impede the safe and efficient flow of motor vehicle traffic. So that's really what they have in there.
Again, there is no requirement that you have that 75% in your ordinance. It provides clarity and a standard, but if you do adopt it, then you would have to meet it every time.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I had a concerned resident send me a message during this discussion. I can tell someone's actually maybe sitting at home watching.
Wait.
A question had come up, and I'm curious if staff researched it because I don't recall us talking about this. Unlike typical motor vehicles that require license and insurance, a golf cart may or may not have license and insurance.
That's right.
That is not a requirement?
That's correct. Yeah, that's not a requirement for this.
There are some jurisdictions in the Commonwealth who have required insurance in their overblown 8-page ordinances adopting golf cart and utility vehicle use, but it is not a state law requirement, and it's not a Virginia code, or VDOT requirement.
Overblown is a technical term? Is it? Okay.
It is for 1020.
Touche.
Things, I'm happy to be here, but they may get a little loose. I'm just saying.
Touche.
Did you text it back, or are they listening?
So license insurance is not required. Slow-moving vehicles, seat belts and horns and a few other things may or may not be required too. So.
That's correct.
Okay. Anything else, board? Comments, questions? We've already had the public hearing. Close that. All right. I'll entertain a motion.
All right, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, ma'am.
You're paying attention, right?
Yes, sir. I sure am.
I move approval of the ordinance amendment that authorizes the operation of golf carts and utility vehicles in certain public streets as outlined in the board packet tonight.
Okay, it's been moved to approve. Do we have a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any additional discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Badesky, roll call vote, please.
Ms. Lachelet?
Yes.
Mr. Alvarez?
Yes.
Mr. Minnick?
Yes.
Mr. Lumpkin?
Yes.
Mr. Peters?
Yes. That's unanimous. That's approved. Thank you very much. We've got two more. And these are due to changes in state law, so.
Yes, these may look a little familiar. All right, I'm going to assume you're ready. All right, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I'm Whit
Yes,
Marshall, the Assistant County Attorney. I have two proposed ordinance amendments before you this evening. Based on our annual review of the General Assembly session, these are two proposed amendments that have also been reviewed by the Planning Commission and recommended for approval. The first one is an amendment to the subdivision ordinance. Our subdivision ordinance currently contains provisions with pre-submission requirements for final plats. In practice, staff has not been enforcing these requirements, so they're forbidden by state law, and staff has not been utilizing those provisions, so there will be zero change to applicants coming in for approval of a final plat. However, I would like to note, anyone who would like to come in before they submit their application, staff is always available to have those pre-application discussions and to help people through those things. It's just the requirements are being cleaned up in the ordinance, assuming you would approve those. So the plat submission changes are pretty general. There's a title change to remove the preliminary phase, just to say plat submissions generally. Also proposing the removal of all language regarding any sort of pre-application requirements. We're adding provisions to be clear as to what the actual submission requirements are when you come in for your final plat application and approval. With regard to the application, the plats are submitted to the plats officer for approval. Plats are deemed submitted upon receipt of both the completed application, but also fees and costs need to be submitted at the same time for an application to be deemed complete. In addition, we've listed the required submissions. These are similar, well, these are the same as to what is normally required. We're just cleaning up the language. Applicants need to identify your existing physical features. That would be swamp, woods,
drainage ways, wetlands, and also any known graves that are on the property, any existing easements, covenants, or other encumbrances on the property. Also provided would be things like sketch plans with a written description outlining the project, preliminary proposals with regard to how you're going to do your utilities and lay out your streets, and also how it relates to the soil survey map. In Section 8, Subpart 2, there aren't any changes. This deals with tentative plat submissions. There were changes to the state law with regard as to who is required to come before the Planning Commission for tentative plat submission approval. We amended this at this time, which is why there are no proposed changes in subsection 2. However, subsection 3 was not cleaned up, so the language is cleaned up to reflect that not every applicant goes through the tentative plat process. So it's more a clarification language rather than substantive. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have with regard to these proposed amendments.
Any questions? Seeing none, thank you for that presentation. We'll go ahead and open up a public hearing. Anyone like to come forward and speak to this application? Yep, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Board, any additional questions or discussions? Okay. I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the ordinance amendment to Article 8 for procedures of plat preparation as presented by Ms. Marshall.
Okay, it's been moved to approve as presented. Do we have a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Mr. Badesky, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Lumpkin?
Yes.
Mr. Minnick?
Yes.
Mr. Alvarez?
Yes.
Ms. Lachlet?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes. Okay, that's unanimous as well. That ordinance amendment's approved. That brings us to number 9.
All right, I'm going to try my luck again. This one is also, as mentioned before, a state law update. This one is to the zoning ordinance. So this has also gone through Planning Commission review and was recommended for approval. The General Assembly enacted a new statute, amended a statute to provide for a new category of variance. This is to provide reasonable accommodation for residents with disabilities that may need to maybe encroach into a setback to provide a ramp for access for a handicapped person. So this would incorporate that additional new category of variance. Now, one thing that's different about this category of variance from most others, once you're granted a variance, it runs with the land. This one is allowed to be limited temporally to how long the disabled person requires this particular accommodation. So if they get better or if they move, then the variance associated with that property, if the disabled person is no longer living there, then the variance would no longer apply. And there is the language that we are adding. I'm happy to answer any questions y'all may have about this new category of variance.
Any questions on this new category? Okay, seeing none, thank you for that presentation. We'll go ahead and open up a public hearing. Anybody like to come forward and speak to this proposal? Just running out of gas, huh?
That's how it goes.
Okay, anybody like to come forward? All right, seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Board, any additional questions or thoughts?
She took my screen off. I was just going to read it off the screen.
Oh. Right here.
I got it. Thank you.
She could have waited till you're halfway through.
I guess we can't
Remember,
do
I
it
have to translate it to Spanish and then back to English.
Sorry about that.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I
Yes, sir.
move that we approve an ordinance to amend Article 26.6, variances as presented by Ms. Marshall.
It's been moved and approved, and it's been seconded. Mr. Badesky, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Minnick?
Yes.
Mr. Alvarez?
Yes.
Ms. Lachlet?
Yes.
Mr. Lumpkin?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes. That concludes the 9 public hearings. Board, is there any additional business to come before this body?
No.
No.
Are you sure?
Yes.
All right, hearing none, this board will adjourn as follows. We'll adjourn until August 29th, 2018 at 1 p.m. for a major thoroughfare plan workshop. That meeting is open to the public, followed by a September 4th, 2018, 11:30 a.m. audit committee meeting. That meeting is open to the public. A 1 p.m. employee service anniversary luncheon, followed by our 3 p.m. regular meeting and our 7 p.m. public hearings, and those meetings are open to the public. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you.